this on the clock this morning? Do we know? Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Can I call you to order, please? Can you take your seats now? Thank you. Many thanks to the Hamey duo who've been playing for us this morning and to Music for Youth for organising that. Congress, just a couple of announcements before we start. A new mobile phone was found in the Old Ship Hotel yesterday evening. If you think it's yours, please contact Ian Lawrence, who will be sat in the NAPO delegation. And secondly, there is a collective photo opportunity for LGBT plus delegates and visitors at 12:45 today at the close of business. And if you want to be part of that photo, if you could meet here at the front of the hall, thank you. I also want to now welcome a number of international guests who have joined us at Congress today. From the ETUC, we have Esther Lynch, who is the Deputy General Secretary. And colleagues, international visitors, if you'd like to stand up when I call you, and then we can welcome you appropriately. And from France, we're delighted to welcome Özlem Yildirim from CGT. From Italy, we're joined by Giuseppe Iliano and from CSIL and Cinzia Del Rio from UIL. From Spain, we have Cristina Faziarben of the CCOO and Ramiro Vega from UGT. And finally, let us welcome Oscar Eneroth from the Swedish Trade Union Confederation, LO Sweden. Congress, I now call upon Linda McCulloch, Chair of the General Purposes Committee, to report to us on the progress of business and other Congress arrangements.
Good morning, Congress. I can report that the General Purpose Committee has approved 4 emergency motions. Emergency Motion 1 on Royal Mail will be moved by the CWU and seconded by Unite. Emergency Motion 2 on UK Embassy relocation will be moved by the NEU and seconded by the UCU. Emergency Motion 3 on Save Our Public Services from Tory Chaos will be moved by the GMB and seconded by Unison. Emergency Motion 4 on rail disputes and the new Transport Secretary will be moved by the RMT and seconded by the TSSA. The President will advise when it's hoped to take these emergency motions. I would also like to remind Congress of the procedure for the distribution of emergency motions. Emergency motions accepted onto the Congress agenda will be mailed to all delegates. A small number of printed copies will be made available in the TUC information stand. The text of any emergency motions will also be shown on the screens at either side of the stage. I will report further on the progress of business and other GPC decisions when necessary throughout Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So I now invite you to formally receive the GPC's report. Is that agreed? Thank you. And as Linda said, I'll advise Congress when I can take those 4 emergency motions. As Linda reported, it's also very important to respect speaking times, 5 minutes for moving a motion and 3 minutes for seconding a motion and all other speakers, and it isn't compulsory to take your full time, and I really appreciate your cooperation with that. Thank you. Can I also remind delegates that the ballot for Section C of the General Council closes at 12 noon today. Those eligible to vote have been sent an email from Civica Election Services with a unique link to the secure voting site. And delegation leaders have been told who to contact in case of a problem with the voting link or any issues with the voting. Also closing this lunchtime is the vote for the best exhibition stand. You'll find a voting card in your delegates pack. Please hand this into the TUC stand on the ground floor by lunchtime, and there'll be a prize draw for those who enter and a chance to win £50 worth of vouchers. Delegates, now on to today's business, and we start with section 3 of the General Council report, Goods Services, from page 34. I call composite motion 15, HSE resourcing. General Council supports the composite motion. It will be moved by Prospect, seconded by EDAS UWT, supported by the FBU, and I will also call in this debate Unite, PCS and Community. So Prospect, if you'd like to come forward.
President Congress, good morning. I'm Jeff Fletcher on behalf of Prospect Moving Motion 56. It's a fundamental right that we all should be able to be kept safe and healthy at work. To fulfil this right, there needs to be a proper system of regulation and enforcement to make sure that employers are following the law and have access to the right advice to keep everyone safe. But for more than a decade now, HSE has experienced sustained and damaging budget cuts, which have undermined this system, leaving HSE in a parlous state. In contrast to a common misconception, HSE has a relatively modest budget for a GB-wide regulator. It's currently funded to a similar level to that of one of the smaller regional police forces. Government funding of the HSE was cut in real terms by 60% between 2010 and 20, and although there's been some additional cash in the last couple of years, this has either been temporary, as in the case of the COVID-19 response, or is ring-fenced to spend on internal change in IT modernisation, such as the funding in the Spend and Review 2021 settlement. Funding constraint has led to a diminished workforce. Total staff numbers have decreased by around 35%. Inspector numbers have shrunk by 18% across all disciplines. And the number of Band 3 regulatory inspectors has now fallen well below 400, a drop of around 29%. There are only 200 of these Band 3 regulatory inspectors in the field operation and construction divisions who do the majority of the work in the non-high hazard areas. And these Band 3 regulatory inspectors carry out the majority of the recorded inspections. They investigate the majority of the mandatory accident investigations, and from all this work they issue the majority of enforcement notices and prosecution cases. Other inspector disciplines are similarly diminished in numbers, as are the scientific support roles that undertake research or provide expert opinion on matters. Is it any wonder the HSE is facing a precipice? The staffing crisis has been compounded by government pay constraint, making it more difficult for HSE to recruit and retain staff, placing yet more pressure on an already overstretched workforce. Progression through the pay systems, through the pay ranges, in HSE was removed in 2013, resulting in some staff with up to 20 years experience in post not getting paid the acknowledged rate for the job. And to make matters worse, that rate for the job has also been eroded by between 20 and 25%. The COVID-19 pandemic put health and safety at the top of the political agenda, demonstrating that health and safety is a vital component of worker protection, business success, and also as an expectation of the public at large. When the pandemic struck, HSE's response was to bolster its workforce by recruiting a handful of retired inspectors and temporarily funding call centres to do phone checks, and then contract bailiff companies to send their staff to workplaces to carry out rudimentary COVID spot checks. This demonstrated HSE in its current form couldn't fulfil the expectations of politicians, workers or the public, and rather than undertake the expected meaningful workplace interventions, the focus was on low quality but high quantity checks following a questionnaire. This busyness should not be presented as an effective HSE. HSE's decline risks reducing regulatory oversight in workplaces, not delivering public assurance, allowing employers to get away with cutting corners, and robs victims of their families of criminal-level justice. Congress, inspections regularly used to hit 25,000 a year or more, but the current targets are set at 14,000. And this low figure itself can only be met by a reduction in other activity across all industries. For example, mandatory investigations, not started due to the lack of staff resource, have skyrocketed from single figures annually to around 400 currently. Enforcement notices have declined by around 73%, and successful prosecutions have declined by 64%. There is a debate to be had around what type of HSE this country deserves and expects, what that looks like in terms of approach, intervention standards and the staff and mix to deliver it. Congress, now is the time for that debate. The funding model of HSE is vulnerable to political fluctuation, and appropriate alternatives should be sought that are free from political interference. HSE should be free to pay its staff appropriately in line with wider comparators and reward capability through development. HSE's published strategy and work plans are determined by available resource rather than public and stakeholder expectations, and we must campaign for a full public consultation on strategy, setting out our baseline expectations to inform us a service delivery underpin that informs approach and staffing mix. The HSE must be able to make impartial...
Jeff, can you wind up, please?
Just wind up now, yeah. This motion calls for all the things to be addressed and calls on the TUC to press for a select committee inquiry challenging the demise of HSE, but also seeking to influence a HSE that is constructed in such a way that it is an effective regulator from the perspective of the trade union movement. Congress, I move.
Bore da llawer, Cynhadledd. Good morning, President, Conference. Angela Butler, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, second in Composite 15, HSE Resourcing. During the pandemic, proactive inspections by the HSE and spot checks stopped. They just stopped. Not at a time when the virus was in decline, but at the peak. Education workers, already exposed to the virus by weak mitigation measures, became even more vulnerable by the lack of a strong body to ensure compliance. When the pandemic hit us in 2020, the HSE's budget had been slashed by 60% since 2010, which reflected in a substantial drop in the number of inspectors and a corresponding drop in the number of workplace inspections. Research by the ILO found a 32% drop in the number of inspectors in the UK since 2010. During the pandemic, the HSE had to be given emergency funding to recruit outsourced inspectors to carry out spot checks. In schools, these checks were carried out by telephone, with schools rapidly aware of what questions were going to be asked and able to prepare responses. Nevertheless, a number of schools were found to be deficient, and yet the NASUWT is only aware of one prosecution that resulted. The HSE phoned 55,000 schools, which is 17% of the number of schools in Great Britain. And of these, they were worried enough to make site visits to 1,000. 50 required formal intervention. The spot check system was discontinued after that 5,000 were completed, and that's not even a quarter of the schools in Great Britain. So 83% remained unchecked. And if the figures for the 17% are reflected in the rest, then you're looking at hundreds of schools that were dangerous working environments that remained untouched. The NASUWT received assurances from the then Secretary of State for Education that the HSE would continue to be assessing compliance in schools during the pandemic. But the HSE did not restart the checks. And when our General Secretary challenged this, the response from the HSE Chief Executive stated that limited resources were a factor in the approach used by the HSE. Congress, nothing is more important than protecting the lives of working people in this country. It's not just the blue light services that do this, the regulatory bodies are crucial. HSE cuts have allowed bad and dangerous practices to flourish. Never has this been more clearly exposed than during the pandemic. There's no point in laws and regulations and policies that seek working people unless there's a strong regulatory body that ensures compliance. We need to bring the HSE back to strength so that it simply can do the job that it was set up to do. Congress, support the motion. Diolch am wrando. Thank you for listening.
President Conference, Jamie Newell, Fire Brigades Union, supporting Composite 15. Yesterday at the Fringe, I quoted a friend from one of my watches, and I'm going to give you another one today. And it was that death is only for the living, and another is that we remember the dead and we fight for the living. The HSE exists to remember the dead and fight for the living. And the FBU want to add solidarity with all those at the Health and Safety Executive. There was more firefighter fatalities in the first 10 to 15 years of my career than the previous 20. Harrow Court, Atherstone, Stour, Shirley Towers, to name just a few tragic incidents where firefighters and members of the public lost their lives. I came to take the safety of my members, my friends, people that I shared laughs and cries with, very seriously. And I was fortunate that the FBU existed to provide a check against the imbalances of unscrupulous managers and dangerous management practices. The HSE celebrates its 50th anniversary, and it was then General Secretary Terry Parry who served on the first Safety Commission, bringing the two together, when we had to fight to secure safety regulations that reps still benefit from today. The link between the FBU and the HSE is a long-standing one. Together with the HSE, they've carried out investigations into serious and fatal accidents, and it's why we're supporting this motion to ensure an appropriately funded HSE remains able to hold power to account, and that nobody goes to work to get injured, maimed, or die. This year also saw the Buildings Act come into force, the government's solution to the Grenfell tragedy, a tragedy that they created with a decade of deregulation. And our fear is that with the FRS and the HSE inadequately funded, they'll be forced to turn to private contractors. I also believe that leadership matters, in that a good leader wouldn't ask you to do something that they haven't or would not do themselves. And yet we have a crop of chiefs and senior managers today who are proposing the biggest gamble to firefighter and public safety perhaps we've ever seen. They are trying to send firefighters above fires in high-rise buildings without the appropriate safety risk control measures and breathing apparatus. Dead firefighters can't save anyone. Firefighter and public safety are one in the same. So we stand with the HSE in resisting the hatchet job that's being attempted by chiefs to railroad a dangerous working practice through. It will only serve to kill firefighters now or later through one of the occupational cancers that have been identified by our work with the University of Lancashire. Nothing's ever been given to us by the kindness of managers or by government's hearts. And we stand on the shoulders of giants before us who've won the conditions, the Safety Act and the HSE for us. And as trade unionists, we need to work together to ensure the HSE remains a world-class agency that protects workers. Our job today, tomorrow, and the day after that is to continue fighting to protect and enhance what we've got or lost. Death is only for the living. Remember the dead, fight for the living. Support Composite 15.
Morning, Conference, Dave Allen, Unite the Union, but I also stand here as the Disabled Workers Representative on the General Council and co-chair of the Disabled Workers Committee. And Conference, for many years now, this Congress has supported the social model of disability. The model that says that we as disabled workers are disabled not by our impairments, but by the way that society treats us. And I come here thanking Congress for the support they've given us and other equality strands, BAM, women, LGBT+. We are driving the agenda forward massively. But not to criticise too much, but we do have to be very much aware of social model language. And we are supporting Composite 15, but there is just a line in the NASUWT amendment which talks about mental ill health. And we in the disabled movement don't talk about mental ill health, we talk about mental health issues. So And I would also like to, rather than come back to the rostrum tomorrow, make a similar comment on motion 36, that the social model language is very important. And again, we are disabled workers, disabled by our impairments. We do not have disabilities. So if all we've got to worry about is a few words of language, we are making tremendous strides forward. So support your disabled colleagues, support the social model of disability, support motion 36 and composite 15. Thank you.
Catherine Williams, speaking on behalf of PCS, to wholeheartedly support Composite 15. The pandemic has exposed the chronic under-resourcing of the HSE as part of the government's deliberate tactics to let the bosses get away quite literally with murder. Our PCS members who work in the HSE, like our prospect comrades, are fully aware of how the cuts have impacted the ability of the HSE to really tackle employers and unsafe workplaces. This is part of the wholesale attacks on jobs and resources across the whole of the civil service. With the government propaganda that the workforce has increased because of Brexit and the pandemic, therefore all government departments need to model 20, 30 and even 40% staff cuts. Despite the pandemic, there's been no overall increase in staffing numbers in the HSE since 2016. The HSE has already slashed costs by 100 million since 2011 with efficiency drives and increased cost recovery. And obviously we have a broken pay system where our members are paying the price for that as well. As well as chronic understaffing, even more work is being piled on HSE workers to take on the role of building services regulator following the Grenfell disaster and the vital research that supported the UK response to COVID-19 and is ongoing. It's impossible for our members to do everything. If the HSE has to stop work on the Health at Work protection programme, there'll be an absolutely adverse impact on people with protected characteristics. And every union in the hall will be painfully aware of these shortcomings too. It's not just our members, but every single workplace. We know the battles that we've had to wage to keep our members and the public safe during the pandemic, and how difficult it was to even get inspectors out to workplaces. I give a big shout out to our comrades in Prospect for the best inspection we got in our sector in the DWP Government Department building in Quarry House in Leeds, where our management were absolutely hauled over the coals for failing to keep a few hundred workers in safe conditions in a building that can house thousands. However, the response from this government department was to try and wriggle out of the report's findings and demanding another opinion from the HSE, and got a less critical supplementary report from another inspector who did not even visit the site. All through the pandemic, we saw the interference and pressure our government department tried to bring to influence reports to the work on getting away with the absolute minimum of safety measures. We need to fight tooth and nail for the enforcement bodies that tackle the unlawful actions of employers. We also recognise that our collective strength in workplaces is also vital to tackling employers' unsafe working conditions. I give a massive shout out to every single health and safety rep and steward that has fought for health and safety protection for our members during the pandemic, and all those workers who took collective action to protect their rights, including our own members in PCS in DVLA. And the many members who all stood together and invoked their health and safety rights not to go into unsafe workplaces. So we need to fight.
Sorry, can you wind up, please?
Collectively, but also support the enforcement bodies as well. Please support.
Good morning, President, Congress. Stephen McGurk, Community Union, supporting Composite 15 on HSE resourcing. Congress, no one's health should be put at risk or an increased risk just by going to work. No one's family, colleagues and communities should be denied justice. And no one should ever go to work, never to return home again to their families and friends. But the unfortunate reality is that workers are being put at risk due to the serious shortage of resources of the HSE. We only need to look at the pandemic as an illustration of how close to breaking point the HSE is. Cuts over the last decade have resulted in major injuries, fatal accidents and dangerous occurrences for too many workers. That is a stark reality of cutbacks to budgets and staffing by successive Tory governments. As my colleagues have already indicated and emphasised, those cuts in real terms equate to a shocking 60% between 2010 and 2020. In the face of such cuts, the HSE cannot protect as many workers. Congress, that means less resources dedicated to proactive inspections of high hazard sites and ultimately bad employers cutting corners on health and safety. So please join our calls for a properly funded HSE with a clear and medium long-term plan, for more support for our committed HSE inspectors and staff, and for effective parliamentary scrutiny so every worker and the public can be kept safe. And ultimately, to put an end to the fatal and costly consequences of ill-equipping health and safety regulators to enforce the law and protect all our members and workers. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you. I think we can now vote on composite motion 15. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Any against, please show. That is carried. I call paragraph 3.4 and composite motion 16, 91,000 civil service job cuts. General Council support this composite motion. It's to be moved by the FDA, seconded by PCS and supported by Prospect.
Good morning, Congress. Tony Wallace, FDA President and an acting civil servant. Congress, I'm often asked, but Tony, there are about 450,000 of you. What do civil servants actually do? To be honest, it's a fair question, but with a little bit of thought, it's an easy one to answer. There's a general misconception held by many people that for the country to function, you only need to put a mark on a piece of paper every few years to elect your Member of Parliament. That MP will then sit down with 649 others, and those 650 will somehow magically administer the state. But that's not how it works. Those 650 decide in the direction of travel, but it's the 450,000 civil servants, along with millions of other public sector workers, who put those policies into practice. We educate our children, we heal the sick, we support the poorest, we administer the law, we defend the country and the environment, we collect taxes, we fund economic development, and we care for the elderly and the infirm. To take just one example, it was the civil service which implemented the job retention scheme, without which unemployment would have reached almost unimaginable levels of about 11 million. Congress, the civil service is a bit like the air around us. You might not be conscious of it, you might not notice it, you might not taste it, smell it or see it, but by God, you'd quickly miss it if it was gone. Without the civil service, the state, however you might want to think of it, would simply cease to function. So how do you determine the right size for the civil service, a service that supports every one of the 66,647,112 people who live in this country? Well, you might start by asking the Office for National Statistics to do some statistical work for you, or the Treasury to crunch some numbers, or the Department of Education to work out what it costs to educate our kids and what we lose as a country if we fail to do so, or the Department of Health to consider how changes in the age demographic of the population impact on health and social care. Or, alternatively, you could just take an ideological approach and pluck a number you fancy right out of the air. That's chicken's entrails decision making. How about taking a figure from 2016 and use that? A figure that ignores a new war in Europe, the cost of living crisis, our extraction from the European Union, the implications and controls of a new customs system, phytosanitary regulations, and the Northern Ireland Protocol, and I haven't even touched on COVID yet. That 2016 figure itself was based on a civil service at the end of the Second World War, when the UK population was 47 million, about 2/3 of what it is now. Not only did they ignore the last 2, 3, 4, 5 or 10 years, they ignored every change in the makeup of the United Kingdom for the past 77 years. That's not evidence-based decision-making, that's ideologically fuelled madness. And how did the 450,000 civil servants find out about this momentous decision, a decision that would remove 1 in 5 of their jobs? They learned it from the press, not from the departments in which they work. That's an appalling way to treat your people and a recipe for chaos and confusion. When this motion was drafted in the summer, it called for the new Prime Minister, once selected, to abandon the destructive approach to arbitrary job cuts. With the delay in TUC convening, I thought that the demand might now be out of date, but given the events of the last few weeks, it appears to be completely contemporaneous. Chaos and confusion seems to be a developing theme, and we're going through chancellors with tiresome regularity. Congress, this cannot go on. Without a properly resourced, staffed and rewarded civil service, the 650 people can pass whatever policies they like, but the honest truth is that you get nothing for nothing, and with nothing you deliver nothing. Those 91,000 jobs means a 20% cut in the staff in the civil service. In the current economic climate, this country depends ever more on the civil service and those civil servants who provide for us. It is intellectually dishonest to suggest, as the Chancellor did just the other day, that you can make those cuts without a cost to the people who depend upon them. That's fraudulent, basically. I know that this TUC and our General Council will help to make the case for a properly resolved and staffed civil service. The country needs a strong and efficient civil service, and that includes the people who work within it. Support the public sector, and the public sector will support you. Congress, I move.
President Congress, Kevin McHugh, on behalf of PCS, to second the motion. Now, my union represents over 185,000 hard-working, dedicated civil servants to keep the country running, and without them, it would come to a standstill, as the previous speaker said. From the courts to the passport officers, the benefit system, civil servants and the work they do is indispensable. During the pandemic, they made immense sacrifices to provide essential services that the public relied upon. Despite everything our members do, we've got a reckless attacks, and now they want to cut our jobs, 91,000. We learned, as a colleague said, through the press, through the Daily Mail in fact, that's how they announced it, that seriously damaged public services still deal with the demands of the pandemic, Brexit and the ongoing economic output. Every occasion when mass job cuts have been announced and carried out, the consequences have been disastrous for the country. It's clearly obvious what the civil service needs is more resources, not less. Job cuts and a lack of investment are making services poorer for those who rely upon them. In the DWP, it's suffering from chronic understaffing, which has led to unmanageable workloads. Passport office staff in the Home Office have struggled with cuts of 700 permanent staff since 2016, which has resulted in significant backlogs. In the Ministry of Justice, is struggling with court backlogs, problems with newer technology, custody time limits, staff retention pressures, and the inability to deliver rehabilitation programmes. The new Chancellor recently said all government departments are going to have to find more efficiencies than we're planning to. We've been cut to the bone already. We should all be ready for a new wave of austerity, and we need to fight it with everything we've got. My union, PCS, has called a ballot of over 150,000 civil servants for strike action. That result will come out in a couple of weeks. Over a decade of being taken for granted and undervalued, we're determined to get the justice that civil servants deserve. The disgraceful treatment by the government of its own workers simply has to stop, because the services that we give to the country, as the previous speaker said, if they disappeared, you'd soon know about it. So if Liz Truss, or whoever, takes a place, comes for our members, they'll face opposition every step of the way. I say, bring it on, we're ready for it. Congress, support the motion.
Good morning, Congress, President. Ellie Wade, President Prospect, in support of this motion, and with thanks to PCS and FDA. Prospect is proud to represent members working in skilled and specialised roles across the civil service. The work they do rarely makes headlines, but it is invaluable. Already we have shortages of key staff across the civil service, with vital functions and services under severe strain. So the MOD doesn't have enough skilled engineers to efficiently and intelligently plan, procure and deliver the equipment programme. Natural England, the Environment Agency and the Forestry Commission don't have enough environmental scientists to deliver their goals and put us on the road to net zero. Departments responsible for major projects such as High Speed 2, nuclear decommissioning, don't have enough digital, commercial and project management professionals to deliver on time and on budget. And you just heard about the HSE. Right now, we need to invest in civil service capacity to meet the challenges we face as a country. But instead, an irresponsible government, desperate for cheap headlines, once again chose to treat civil servants like a political football. You've heard from the FDA that the figure of 91,000 was plucked out of the air, with no consideration for the state of the civil service or the needs of the public. And you've heard that the plans were shared with the press before civil service employers or unions. Senior leaders woke up to find about a job cuts they would have to implement splashed on the front pages. Of course, since that announcement, we've had one new Prime Minister and 3 different Chancellors at the time of counting, and this has brought a different take on it. At first, maybe it was being rowed back. This again wasn't shared with either the employers or the unions, by the way. It was shared with the press. So depending on when or perhaps who you ask, maybe this is less concerning than it was. But I don't think so, because the latest position is that more and deeper cuts than expected are being sought from departments. Still, we are in the dark over what work the government no longer wants doing. It simply isn't feasible that these cuts can be found from efficiencies. And at the same time, the government is after drastically reducing the redundancy terms that were negotiated and agreed with Conservative ministers. So Prospect has been highlighting the vital work of our members in public services through our Serving Our Society campaign. We are organising in branches, and where members want to strike, we are committed to supporting that. I call on Congress to support this motion, to support our civil servants, on whose hard work we all rely in countless ways every day. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now vote on Composite Motion 16. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Any against? That is carried. I now call Motion 58, Defending Public Service Broadcasting. General Counsel support the motion. It's to be moved by Prospect, seconded by NUJ, and I will also call equity in this debate.
President Congress, Philippa Childs, Prospect Deputy General Secretary and Head of our BEC2 sector, moving Motion 58. This week, the BBC celebrates its centenary, an opportunity, you would think, to celebrate its public service ethos, its mission to inform, educate and entertain. A time to be proud of a uniquely British institution that is, quite rightly, the envy of the world. A time to look back with pride on the BBC's record during the COVID-19 pandemic, when it became the country's biggest classroom, supporting teachers and helping parents to educate their children, with 67% of primary school children and 72% of secondary school students using the BBC's resources. A time to reflect that the top 10 most watched TV moments of all time were on the BBC. A time for us all to recall those unforgettable moments in recent history that remain clear in our minds because we watched them on the BBC. And yet, Congress, the values and ethos of public service broadcasting are under attack like never before. Instead of celebrating the BBC and Channel 4 as important assets to the creative industries and UK PLC, This government is intent on undermining them. In the BBC's case, by destabilising its funding model and challenging its purpose, and in the case of Channel 4, proposing to sell it off, despite a consultation exercise which showed 96% of respondents thought that the sale would be a mistake and deeply damaging to the creative landscape of the nations and regions of the UK. By announcing a freeze on the licence fee for the next 2 years and their intention to scrap it by 2028, the government have been responsible for further cuts in services and job losses in the BBC. The licence fee may not be perfect, but neither are the alternatives. Research has shown that if you wanted to get the range of services that you get from the BBC on subscription, then it would cost you £400 a year, making the licence fee at £159 incredible value for money. Neither is funding the BBC from advertising viable without seriously damaging the income stream for ITV and Channel 4. Funding the BBC through general taxation would make it even more subject to pressure from the government of the day. In our view, the licence fee allows the BBC to plan for its future, to innovate and modernise as it must, to speak for all of the UK, and to continue to provide the range of services that makes it unique. The BBC is hugely important to the UK economy. It provides a gross value add of £4.9 billion each year, with 50% of its economic impact outside of London. It is on target to spend an additional £700 million outside of London by 2027-28, which will generate £850 million for the UK economy. This investment in our nations and regions has a multiplier effect on local economies, bringing jobs, investment, skills and creativity to local areas. Congress, I am not claiming that the BBC is perfect or beyond criticism, but what institution of 20,000 people is? Like many of you, most of you, all of you probably, I regularly shout at the television over coverage of some political story or other on the news. And of course, our members at the BBC are facing the same issues that many of you are also facing: job cuts, pension reform, and difficult pay negotiations at a time of high inflation. But the BBC and Channel 4 both play a crucial role in the ecosystem of the creative industries, investing in skills and creativity to make the British creative sector the best in the world, and they must be protected. Congress, I'm asking you not only to support this motion, but also to promote the campaign to protect the BBC and stop the sale of Channel 4 in your branches and communities. This is a crucial battle for the future of public service broadcasting in the UK, and one we must win. I move.
President Congress, Chris Frost for the NUJ, supporting the motion. And excuse me for a moment while I get my tablet reloaded. It's done the dirty on me. What can I say? This motion calls on the General Council to campaign to get the government to abandon its lunatic proposals to privatise Channel 4 and effectively defund the BBC. There are two good reasons for this, Congress, that I want to put. There are a lot more, but there are two particularly good ones. One, that it's wrong in principle. Public service broadcasting has a vital role to play in the cultural life of this country and its people. And the second one is that if we've learnt anything over the past few years of this appalling government, it's that practically all of their policy experiments introduced from the Thatcher years have not worked and are detrimental to workers and to the public generally. As the motion identifies, the BBC is more than just the licence fee, and Channel 4 is more than just another commercial TV channel. Both of them have the luxury of considering their audience rather than just the market, as real people, living beings with human needs from widely differing backgrounds with widely diverse needs. Unconnected with consumerism and spending power, needs tied simply to a requirement to be informed and their desire to be entertained. In addition, and this is particularly applies to Channel 4, public service broadcasting is obliged to consider innovations in programming, giving an opportunity to new talent and helping develop new writers, producers and performers. That's something, frankly, that privately owned TV is not especially good at. The risk is too great. Better to stick to the known, the reality shows, the trusted formats, the trusted performers. Our TV and radio is, or was until the government flooded the BBC with openly conservative supporting managers, able to produce excellent documentaries, exciting dramas, good news services, uproarious comedies, fun, light entertainment programmes. Channel 4, with its particular remit to innovate, was even more daring. And many of our favourite comedies or dramas, or at least many of mine, I have to say, as well as superb news programmes and documentaries, started on Channel 4, and its back catalogue of programmes is now freely available online, still a go-to for many for an evening of enjoyable entertainment. So that's my first point. Public service broadcasting provides what the public wants and what private broadcasting cannot easily provide. So on to point 2, and I'll keep this very short because I'm running out of time. No one these days is going to fall for the idea that taking public services into private ownership...
Delegate, I'm sorry, you have run out of time, so can you...
Let me down. Support the motion, colleagues.
Linda Rook, Equity, supporting motion 58. Congress, in 2014, I was at the TUC Congress in Liverpool, and I spoke on a motion about protecting public sector broadcasting. And we're back again. We're back again, and this time we've got Channel 4 added to the list for privatisation. And you know, I've heard a lot about chancellors and ropey chancellors over the last few days and weeks, but trust me, have you taken a look at the culture ministers? The last one actually didn't even know that Channel 4 wasn't funded by the government. It's a shocker. So I just want to say that this should not be under threat. There was a survey where 60,000 people responded, and they said the majority said they supported Channel 4. And I've heard from a very good source that it's not off the table, the privatisation, even though that has been reported. So we still have got to defend it. I worked on 2 soaps on that programme. And basically, it's a place where innovation and the independent sector can survive and thrive. And there are hubs to be proposed in Leeds, Glasgow and Bristol. And if Channel 4 is privatised, they will go. So the claim by this government about levelling up will fall. And there's also another thing. There is a threat to content, because if it is sold off, then it will be the global content that will be the focus, not the local, not the national. So shows like Derry Girls and It's a Sin will not be made, and that will be a terrible shame. And also, if you look at the turbulence in the streaming markets at the moment, the number of people who are stopping their subscriptions because the cost of living crisis. And privatisation, with hindsight, we all know it fails. And the companies either fall down or they come asking for government support. And this neoliberalist thinking with the short-term gain, with the sort of people that would sell their own mother if they could make a fast buck. So I support this. I ask you to support it in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now vote on motion 58. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Any against? That is carried. We now continue with section 3 of the General Council report, Good Services, the section on education and skills from page 37. I call paragraph 3.6 and motion 54, standing and profile of education in the UK. General Council support the motion. It's to be moved by the NAHT and seconded by UCU, and I will also call Unison, GMB and the NEU in this debate.
Good morning, President Congress.
Hello.
I'm Paul Gosling. I'm the president of NAHT, the School Leaders Union. I've been a teacher since 1992, and I've led schools in the Southwest for the last 20 years. Now, working in education is a hugely worthwhile career. Working with the children and young people of this nation is a privilege and often a great joy. However, over the past 12 years, I and my school leader colleagues have witnessed an increasingly dramatic erosion of the education system. There has been an erosion of school funding, an erosion of staff morale, and a degrading of the important community services that support children and their families. NHT believe that there has been a lack of political vision for education. Multiple Secretaries of State for Education have been more concerned about reorganising the school system than setting out a cogent plan for the education system and for investing appropriately in it. This political neglect is leading to real problems in the recruitment and retention of staff at all levels. Our vital support staff, our talented teachers, our experienced school leaders are leaving the system in increasing numbers, and we're failing to attract new staff into the education workforce. For example, the targets for the recruitment of people into teacher training have been missed in 8 of the last 9 years. Education is a people business. A great education system needs to attract and retain great people. And over the last 3 years, the process of erosion in education has, as Paul Whiteman, our General Secretary, said yesterday, felt more like an act of vandalism. This government has failed to support the recovery of children's education after the pandemic, failed to maintain the value of pay for everyone working in education, failed to invest in school buildings, and they have failed to have a vision for the education system that matches the ambition that the people who work in education have. And now there's rumours of cuts to education. Now, this government likes to talk about the importance of growth and the economy. If you want to grow an economy for the future, you need an excellent education system in the present. And if you want to achieve that, you need a clear vision for education and a clear plan to invest in children's education now. Congress, we call on all political parties to prioritise education and make it central to their manifesto commitments. Congress, please support this motion.
Good morning, Congress. My name is Justine Mercer, and I'm President-elect of UCU. We wholeheartedly support this motion, and our amendment simply seeks to broaden its scope so that it includes all of post-16 education in all its forms, be that further education, adult and community education, prisons, or higher education. Everyone in the hall knows the transformative value of education. Most of us have experienced firsthand its capacity to build not just skills, but self-worth, not just content, but compassion, not just expertise, but empathy. Our members transform lives every day in colleges, prisons, and universities. But we are doing this vital work with one hand tied behind our backs, because post-16 education is massively underfunded, and since 2009, staff pay has fallen in real terms by 35% in FE and 25% in HE. Not to mention the pay inequality on grounds of gender, ethnicity, and disability, or the rampant casualisation, or the unsustainable workloads, and the repeated attacks on our pensions. We have had a decade of austerity, during which education resources have been cut to the bone. And now, because the government just tanked the economy, we are being faced with the threat of yet more cuts. Well, Congress, we won't stand for it. We won't let Tory ministers or billionaire hedge funders sacrifice the life chances of our children, our young people, or indeed anyone who needs and deserves an education. For the sake of our children and our young people and our planet, we won't let education be on the chopping block again. And in closing, I want to say a few words about UCU's current campaigns. It's true that the sector is underfunded, but it's also true that employers have made a conscious choice to undervalue workers and deny them a decent pay rise. We've been offered a derisory 2.5% in FE and 3% in HE and prisons. So solidarity with the FE colleges that are today taking strike action for the 4th consecutive week. Solidarity with the prison educators, 400 Novus prison educators who secured a strike mandate with a 94% yes vote. And solidarity with the 70,000 university workers who are awaiting their ballot result on Monday. All of our sectors are rising. We deserve better. Our students deserve better. Please support the motion and the amendment.
Speaker from Unison next, please.
Good morning, President, Congress. Rena Wood, Unison, speaking in support of this motion. Now, education, what does it mean to people? It gives children, young people, young adults choices, and they have a right. They deserve those choices. What does Liz Truss say? Many times about she cares about the nation. Nation this, nation that, nation the other. She doesn't care about the nation of working class people. What she cares about is the nation of elites, the privileged. That's who she cares about. The Tories have continuously talked about our communities relying on state benefits, nanny states. But actually, hundreds and hundreds of public schools, they get charitable status, they get tax relief. Our schools, our community schools that educate our working class children, they have to pay the full council tax. That is state benefit. Those privileged people get those state benefits at the cost of suffering of our children. And why did it take Marcus Rashford, young black man, Manchester United player, to push the issue with the government about feeding our children? Because those kids that go to Eton and Rodine and those kind of schools, they're not worrying about getting a hot meal. And through the pandemic, our members, everybody in schools went to work to look after vulnerable children, to look after key workers' children. And poor children, they get breakfast clubs, they get hot food in the middle of the day from our community schools, state schools. This government does not give a damn about our nation, our communities, working class people. It is very clear because the funding cuts have been absolutely phenomenal. And again, those public schools, you know, they don't suffer. And England, it's prestigious. People want to come to Oxford and Cambridge. And Lord help you if you're working class and black trying to get into those institutions. The research has confirmed that as well. So our communities, whatever we look like, face massive challenges. And we have a right to those choices. And statistics and research has actually shown that working class people, when they get into adulthood, if they want to go back into education, more people end up getting degrees by accessing further education. So it is so important and vital to us, our children, our families, our young adults, to ensure they have the choices, the fair choices that the public school kids get. Please support this motion. Thank you.
President, Congress, Lucy Humphreys for the NEU, first-time delegate, first-time speaker. I'm here to strongly support this motion on behalf of the NEU. Having worked at the chalk face for the last, I'm going to say 21 plus years, experiencing daily the impact of the funding crisis in education. Just one example. 6 glue sticks for 30 children that's got to last me for the whole academic year. Well, I am a maths teacher, so I'm very good at fractions, but I'm not a magician. The government's white paper on education doesn't address the concerns of the Public Accounts Committee about the financial sustainability of the school system and their concern about deprived schools under the department's new funding system. The current government's focus on academisation is a huge distraction from real educational issues, such as the urgent teacher retention and recruitment crisis, child poverty and the impact on learning. Let's be honest, how can you learn if you are cold and hungry? Intensification of educators' workload, often leading to ill health of members through excessive working hours and excessive workload. The government's agenda on academisation states that all schools in England should be in or in the process of joining an academy by 2030. Let's be honest, since the Schools Bill of 2016, academisation has been this main focus for our government. However, will we have a U-turn very soon on this year's school bill? Education staff should not be forced to go along with academisation, with structural changes that will often leave them with less voice and worse conditions of employment. Ironically, as teachers' pay gets worse, MAT's CEO pay seems to be soaring. We need to address the underlying funding issues around schools, especially schools in highly populated poverty areas, where cuts to local authority services are already impacting on those local communities. It's time for educational professionals to be valued. It's time for their professional views based on their daily experiences and expertise to be heard. Failure to fund education is a failure to invest in the future of this country. Value educators, value education. Please support this motion.
Have we got the GMB to speak in this debate? Can't see a GMB speaker. In which case we'll vote on motion 54. Will all those in favour please show? Any against? That is carried, thank you. I now call motion 55. Right support, right place, right time, send review green paper. General Council support the motion. It's to be moved by the AEP and seconded by NEU.
President, Dewi Hughes, President of the Association of Educational Psychologists, speaking for the first time at Congress, and it's great to be here. Congress, the pandemic had a huge impact on children and young people. The closure of schools particularly impacted the approximately 1.5 million children and young people with additional learning and special educational needs across the UK. Existing weaknesses in the system were exacerbated and many children were out of sight of services. There is an urgent need for reform. The AEP is participating in discussions in all areas of the UK with the aim of improving services, including the SEND review in England. We welcome and support the emphasis on inclusion. We are concerned, though, that despite this acknowledgement, the government in Westminster seems focused on administrative structures at national and local levels rather than more fundamental reforms. Congress. For every child in every part of the UK, with attention to those children with additional needs, we need to construct an inclusive learning environment, encompassing a range of young people's interests and abilities. Inclusion is a fundamental human right. We need to rethink behaviour policies and move on from punitive approaches and restrictive practices, such as internal exclusions in schools, that fail to recognise that behaviour is an interaction and often communicates unmet need. Our starting point as educational psychologists specialising in working with children and their families, including those who have experienced trauma, disrupted relationships, or feelings of being unsafe or anxious, is that children need secure, caring, and nurturing relationships. The founding trade unionist, Robert Owen, demonstrated in New Lanark that all children flourish in an inclusive and nurturing environment where they are shown respect and kindness and can exercise choice. We need an inclusive curriculum that is a gateway to the 21st century for all children. The new curriculum in Wales, started last month, is a good model of a decentralised, flexible and inclusive structure. It includes a balanced approach to teaching reading rather than a narrow focus on synthetic phonics. In England, the baccalaureate should be broadened out to include the creative arts, which are essential for a rounded education. We need to reduce and reform assessment, moving beyond non-stop testing, which is both boring and demoralising. If the learning environment and curriculum was more inclusive, there would be an increase in engagement and behaviour for learning. Finally, importantly, we need services to be properly funded, reversing a decade of decline in per-pupil spending and the impact of cuts in local authority budgets for specialist services, including a shortage of educational psychologists. Congress, we would like to see all these issues addressed as part of a national education plan developed with partners, including trade unions and professional associations, and with children's organisations and children themselves. The aim of the plan must be to create an inclusive learning environment for all children and young people, enabling them to leave the compulsory stage of their education healthy, happy, and well prepared to enter adulthood. Thank you.
President, Congress, Emma Parker, National Education Union. The Green Paper was years in the making. Educators, parents and other professionals hoped, prayed that the government had heard our pleas, that the system was unwieldy, impersonal, underfunded and punished those who were inclusive. But alas, we got a paper full of holes which demonised educators and parents with no tangible solutions for the difficulties our children and young people face. This uncaring, heartless government has spent years passing the blame. It's parents' fault they don't discipline and support their children. It's the educators' fault they don't care. It's the local authorities' fault because they don't support their schools. Well, today we are putting the government on notice. We see you, we know what you are doing, and we will not allow you to cast our children and young people aside. We will not allow you and for families to be forced onto benefits and into poverty because a parent has to leave their job because they need to be at home with their child. We will not stand by and watch our educators crumble because there is no support available. The paper states that early intervention is key, but how do we achieve this when services are stretched to the max? There's an old saying that it takes a village to raise a child, but for our children and young people, the village has been abandoned. It's a ghost town. The paper argues that outcomes for children and young people with send are poor, and I can't disagree. But assigning blame to parents and carers who were at breaking point and professionals who were overworked and underpaid is not the way forward. Let me tell you a story about a boy, his family and their educational journey. James loved going to his infant school. His class was small, his teachers knew him. He was curious, he was quirky and loved to investigate the world. But like all good stories, they come to an end. As James left infants, his education became more formalised. His difficulties became more obvious. He was in crisis, dysregulated, and even with the support of amazing staff, he was unable to engage. His timetable was reduced. He was on waiting list upon waiting list, and his parents were repeatedly called to attend school because of his dysregulation. School was in crisis. They reached out agencies for support, but there was none available. James reached year 6. He's still awaiting diagnosis. He still didn't have an education healthcare plan. His mental health deteriorated. He missed 222 sessions in school. He was hospitalised with significant and graphic threats of suicide. Despite all of this, James passed his SATs. Due to James's difficulties, he needed a specialist provision, but none was available. James's mum left the job that she loved so she could support him whilst he stayed at home for a year with no provision. Fast forward 5 years, James has just left secondary with 3 functional skills at level 1. This child with so much academic promise. His parents are paying off £12,000 in arrears in utility bills. Conference, I cannot stress the importance of early intervention and support for schools. Can
I ask you to wind up, please?
We need co-production and collaboration. We need a well-thought-out plan that is fully funded with access to specialist support. Conference, I am one of those thousands of families and educators ignored and abandoned by the system. Conference, I am James's mum. Please support.
Congress, Harold Gurdon, NSUWT, the Teachers Union. I'm speaking in support of motion 55. NSUWT welcomes any meaningful discussions around special education needs and disability. We recognise how important it is that the right framework for high-quality training, focused monitoring and reporting. It is important that this is clear and transparent and follows the code of practice, which is statutory guidance which public bodies must heed and undertake their functions. The NSUWT believes that all special education need coordinators should have sufficient time and support to enable them to undertake their roles and responsibilities. We would argue that this includes ensuring that the SENCOs had dedicated time to complete the national award within an appropriate timescale. Further to this, sufficient time to complete the award should ensure the right to a reasonable work-life balance, a requirement under contractual provisions, school teachers' pay and conditions document. The NSUWT's members have reported to us that they feel the decade of austerity has affected the delivery of SEND service and believe this must be corrected as a matter of urgency. Members have shared further concerns around cuts in provision, in particular mainstream schools that have suffered years of underinvestment. This has resulted in a failure to provide the necessary support for students with identified needs. All proper consideration should be given regarding age-related expectations and pupils with protected characteristics. Our members have made it clear the current system is not working for this cohort and we need a system that is efficient, equitable and transparent. This should be with a full and meaningful consultation. Our members have reported long delays in waiting for support to meet the needs of young people with communication, interaction, cognition and learning difficulties, those with social, emotional and mental health issues and those with sensory or physical disabilities. This especially relates to the waiting times for children and adolescent mental health services and education health care plans. The NSUWT believes that the government should engage further with trade unions and stakeholders to explore ways to cancel existing local authority deficits. This would help stabilise the services provided across local authorities. In particular, I can speak for Stoke-on-Trent Unitary Authority. The outcome are clear from the National Commission's report that a robust package of CPD is essential and integral to this and to regular carefully sequenced training. The NSUWT feels that the government should support specialist provision across local authorities and not be defined by boundaries. Further concerns have been raised by members due to the financial pressures. Not enough resources have been provided in all education settings. The impact of this is a serious workload issue. The government mentioned the possibility of amending schools' accountability system in this area. We believe this will not take action of the diverse needs and cultural backgrounds of our students. We need a system that delivers the right support in the right place and at the right time for every child and young person. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you. We'll now move to vote on motion 55. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Any against? That is carried. Congress, before we move to the next debate, can I just remind speakers that when you come up, you need to get your delegate credentials scanned. So if you can do that as soon as you come up, please. So we now return to section 4 of the General Council report, Winning More for Workers. The section on organising from page 40. I call paragraphs 4.1 to 4.3 and composite motion 18, rebuilding industrial power, supporting collective action and fighting for a new deal for workers. General Council support the composite motion. It's to be moved by Unite, seconded by CWU and supported by PCS, RMT and the NEU. Unite, please come forward.
Congress Chair Sharon Graham Unite, moving composite 18. Friends, I bring with me solidarity from over 400 Unite picket lines that have lined the streets and the cities throughout our nations, from the docks in Liverpool and Felixstowe to Stagecoach in Hull. So let's say here together, to every worker on strike, to every worker who has been on strike, to every worker who is fighting for their families, in every one of our unions, on our shores and beyond, we stand with you, we are proud of you, solidarity to you all. And Congress, we now must be ready for what they have in store for us. They will make workers and communities pay again. We are already seeing the biggest squeeze on incomes in generations. Trickle-down economics does not work. Liz Truss says, all we need is a bigger pie. What is the point of a bigger pie when the same people divide it? Congress, we will not allow myths to be peddled. It's not wages driving inflation, it's unfettered profit and profiteering. We will not allow them to put one hand in our pocket and the other up our back. Not this time. Not this time. Friends, they are taking workers and communities for a ride. Workers and communities have just paid back. In the last financial crash, we have just paid back with 10 years of austerity, 10 years of pain, 10 years of suffering. And now they say, city bankers, let rip again, take those risks again. They've paid it back. You can start all over again. And to our energy, think of this, 30% of the current price cap is pure and utter profit. The Prime Minister's answer is to freeze prices and make workers pay further down the line. Well, here's an answer. Cap the abhorrent profit and take energy back in our control. Friends, when they threaten us further, and they will, we will be ready. We will be levelling the playing field. We'll put more and more money into our £50 million strike fund. And if they tax our strike pay, we will add the tax on. If they raise the thresholds, we will meet them. And if they attack our reps, we will defend them by all and every means. If they attack our reps, we will defend them by all and every means. And Congress, I say to Labour, because it is important, that they do not stand on the sidelines now and play this safe. Clear blue waters opened up, but they cannot stand on the sidelines and play this safe. Be bold, Labour. Be on the side of workers. Stop apologising for sticking up for workers on strike. There is already a very, very loud voice for the business lobby. It's called the Tory party. We have not changed the goalposts, Labour. You have. This is the question of our time. Whose side are you on? Friends, the flame flickers anew. We can believe the flame flickers anew. The rebirth of the trade union movement has now begun, but we have to be serious about winning. We must now begin the road to real industrial coordination across our employers, across our sectors, across our industries, focusing on jobs, pay and conditions. And to do that, we have to commit to the hard miles of organising, detailed planning, with workers at the table from the very beginning. There are no shortcuts. This is not something that can be done by others. We cannot trade our industrial power for political promises and jam tomorrow. Because let's remember this. This Prime Minister only threatens us because she knows the potential in this hall, in our reps, in our workplaces, in our unions. Bad employers fear worker power, not how much money we give to the Labour Party, real worker power. It's the power of collective organisation that is really feared in boardrooms. Because let's face it, if bosses go out and strike, no one notices. When workers go out and strike, everyone notices because we do the work and we create the profits. Friends, the baton has been passed on to us. We should not use this precious time to retread old wars. We now need to believe in our ability to win, to defend workers, to fight for workers, to back workers. We need to build a movement, not just a moment, because that's how we're going to change the real centre ground in politics for the long term. Congress, let our heroes be the collective. Let our heroes be the collective. Let's win. Let's encourage people to take part in action for the very first time. Winning breeds confidence, and confident unions can and do change everyday lives. Finally, Congress, this is the moment to stand on our own 2 feet. It's workers that give us hope, a hope that we can believe in. We do not have to take what we are given this time. Let's not apologise for who we are. Lift up our heads as well as our banners. Victory to the strike. See you on the picket line. I move.
Thank you. Can we have CWU to second?
President, Congress. Karen Rose on behalf of the Communication Workers Union to second composite motion 18. Congress, the CWU has been calling for a new deal for workers since 2016 to tackle the crisis of insecure employment and in-work poverty. After 12 devastating years of Tory rule, our economy is completely broken and rigged against workers who are forced to work harder, faster and for longer for less. But still the Tories aren't satisfied. They want to rip up and bring even more anti-trade union laws, closing down EU-derived workplace rights on holiday pay, working hours and equal pay. Key workers like 999 operators, nurses and delivery drivers who ministers clapped during the pandemic aren't earning enough to eat and heat their homes. The latest data from the Food Foundation shows that 10 million adults and 4 million children cannot afford regular meals, and food banks have been set up in workplaces, including in the BT contact centres, and this is a company making £1.3 billion in annual profit after tax, but they're still refusing to pay their workers properly. The arrogance and ignorance of the BT board is so staggering that it only strengthens the resolve of our CWU members to keep on taking the strike action in defence of their pay and conditions. Over 40,000 of them have been already on strike for 6 days during the summer, and with more to come, including tomorrow and next Monday. Royal Mail is another former state-owned company not willing to share its success with its workforce. Not to forget, this company did very well in public hands for over 500 years until the Tories sold it off to their mates on the cheap, shortchanging the taxpayers by £1 billion. Last year, Royal Mail made £750 million in profit and paid out £567 million of that in shareholder dividends. At the same time, they pleaded poverty and imposed a massive pay cut on our members. Our members are not prepared to stand for it, and needless to say, they've been out on strike fighting for their pay, their jobs, and the services they provide. Enough is really enough. We need a new economic system, a new deal, and we need good pay and dignity for workers, and to end the growing crisis in in-work poverty in Britain today. We need to put a stop to the race to the bottom and start the race to the top by agreeing common bargaining agendas across all sectors of the economy. We need to link up with community organisations and to build collectivism, solidarity and mobilisation right across the country. And we need to launch innovative forms of collective action the workers can all participate in. Now is the time for a whole new movement, to unite like never before, to get out there on our streets, take coordinated industrial action in defence of working people and the essential public services we all rely on. Thank you. I second.
President Conference, Fran Heathcote on behalf of PCS. PCS supports the composite. Workers across the public and private sectors are facing unprecedented attacks on their pay and living standards. In June, the real value of workers' pay fell at the fastest rate for 20 years. Things could get even worse. Pay rises below inflation will mean the biggest fall in wages for over a century. Low pay has meant that living standards have been plummeting for over a decade, and they are set for the largest drop on record. Many workers are now relying on food banks because their pay is so low and the crippling cost of living crisis bites. 8% of PCS members have told us that they've used a food bank this year, but PCS members aren't alone. Nurses, university and college staff have also reported having to rely on food banks because their pay simply can't stretch to cover the basics such as food. While the working class suffer, the rich continue to get richer. Pay of the richest 1% rose by almost 4 times the rate of the poorest. CEOs of Britain's biggest companies enjoyed a 39% pay rise in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our members are suffering immensely, but we should all be bracing ourselves for a further onslaught. The government has spoken of difficult decisions when it comes to public spending. This is an all too familiar phrase that harks back to the Osborne and Cameron years when the austerity agenda decimated public services. Within days of being appointed as the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt said that all government departments are going to have to find more efficiencies than they were planning to. Despite assurances from the Prime Minister, we should all be bracing ourselves for the return of austerity. PCS is already battling to save over 91,000 jobs in the civil service, which are at risk of being axed, and which you've heard about this morning. And across other parts of the public sector, spending cuts are predicted to lead to over 100,000 job losses. Given what workers have faced and what they have to come, we need a united campaign of coordinated industrial action that can win for our members in the public and private sector. Now is the time for the TUC and the unions to take bold and radical action. We cannot afford to get this wrong. Our members have suffered too much for us to fail. Hundreds of thousands of train workers, postal workers, open reach staff, dockers, bus drivers and criminal barristers have taken action this year. Even 800 plus non-unionised workers at Amazon staged a walkout after they were offered an obscene 35 pence pay increase. With more unions balloting in the next few months, including over 150,000 PCS members, the potential for large-scale coordinated action is huge. In 2011, over 2 million public sector workers walked out over brutal pension reforms. It was the biggest outbreak of strike action in 3 decades. The threat posed to workers now is of a much larger magnitude and affects many millions more workers. In the face of these attacks, we need a trade union response that can meet this challenge. There is too much on the line to fall short. Conference, please support this composite. Thank you.
Good morning. Mick Lynch, RNT, rising in support of the composite. Most of what I wanted to say has been said very well by the previous speaker, so I won't detain you. But I do want to thank the movement for the support they've given to our members and the nice things that have been said about our union over the last 6 months or so. But we need to win our dispute. We need to bring it to a head, and we're hearing today that they're going to bring in the minimum service levels possibly by sending us a letter today or tomorrow, and that will be directly targeted at our dispute. So it's going to get tougher, and there's no sign that these employers, at the behest of this government, is backing away. So we're going to redouble our efforts, as I said yesterday. We're going to name more action, and we hope that's a part of a wave of industrial action. But what I do want to say is that we must lead. We are the organised working class, and we must lead the entire working class. And I'm calling on the TUC, as part of our contribution to this debate, is to put yourself in the vanguard of where the people need to be in this country. It's my firm belief that the people of Britain and of the UK are ready for change. They're crying out for it in many ways. Every time we put on even a spontaneous gathering or demo, we get hundreds, if not thousands of people, non-union people and trade unionists as well, turning up to show their support. The support on the picket lines has been tremendous. Our members are fully engaged, and so is everyone else. Willing, CWU, Unite, other unions to win these disputes. And I'm calling on the TUC. We had a great demonstration in June. It was bigger than even we thought it would be, I believe. We've got our rally and lobby coming up in a couple of weeks' time. But let's face it, we'll be lobbying the people that are trying to do us in. We need to get the people that support us out on the street. So what this should mean going forward is a mass mobilisation of the working class. We've got to reach into every village, every church, every temple, every mosque, every gurdwara, every synagogue, wherever our people are, we've got to be there with them. Town hall meetings, galvanising a wave of response, community action coupled with industrial action. That's what a new deal for the working class means. We've got to put our values out there. We've got to get people on the streets in support of industrial action, in support of public ownership, in support of public services, and in support of the redistribution of wealth in this country in favour of working people. So let's commit ourselves to that as a result of this debate and moving this resolution, and make sure that the TUC is leading the working class in struggle in every aspect of our society. Please support the resolution.
Phil Clark from the National Education Union. I was in one of those sort of snatched moments you get between lessons talking to my head of department, and I was complaining that when you work it out compared to 2010, we're doing the whole term for free. And he said, well, yeah, that's why I'm leaving. On Monday, after 4 months of advertising, somebody was coming for an interview. They didn't show up. We've got no one to replace him. Now, that's nothing compared to the stories millions of our members could tell about the impacts of austerity, but it is no way to run public services. Austerity has never ended. But we've got the best chance now, I believe, certainly industrially, since 2011 and the pensions dispute, to put an end to austerity. I think we've got to seize this opportunity. We've got to seize this opportunity to stop the Tories. We've got to seize this opportunity to make sure any incoming Labour government has no possible room to go back to implementing austerity. How do we do that? That's what we really need to think through. We've got to be absolutely serious about workplace organisation. Yes, we should be inspired by the RMT, by the CWU, by ASLEF, by the UCU, by the members in Unite, by the members in the GMB and the depots around here. Yes, we should be inspired by them, but we should learn from them in terms of how they are organising in the workplace. We've got to learn in the NEU. We've got to deliver a ballot across 22,000 workplaces. While we've got to do that work, we also need to turn outwards. We've got to coordinate our work. This motion's excellent. It's got lots of good suggestions in it. But coordination isn't an optional thing. The best thing for the NEU is victory to the CWU, is victory to the RMT. The best thing for our members in delivering the ballot is that our sister trade unions and education are going with us, is that workers across the NHS are going with us in those ballots. We mustn't let people down. Coordinating at the top, coordinating at a workplace level is not optional. Our members' collapse in living standards demands we coordinate. Our members' instincts to work together demand we coordinate. We've got to learn from each other. We've got to learn from each other to deliver the ballots. We've got to run these disputes together. We've got to strike together. And ultimately, the one thing our members want more than anything is us to pull together, to coordinate, to win together. Thank you, Congress.
Thank you. We'll vote now on Composite Motion 18. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Any against? That is carried. I now call Motion 66, Organise the Unorganised, linking with Trades Councils. General Council support the motion. It's to be moved by Peter Billington on behalf of the TUC Trades Councils Conference, seconded by the POA, and I will also call the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union to speak.
Thanks very much, President. Peter Billington, representing the Trades Union Councils Conference, moving up motion 66. And just let me say that although the motion is relatively lengthy and looks a bit abstract, at its heart is something which is key to this section of our debate this morning, and that's the organisation of groups of workers who are exceptionally difficult to reach, and those are the 18 to 21-year-olds in industries which include retail, hospitality, etc. And although the resolution looks at the link between trade unions and trades councils, it is concerned with that fundamental issue. There are 150 local TUCs left in Britain. And that's obviously impossible to argue against the decline in the numbers, but we think, for the Trades Union Councils Conference, that local TUCs are one of the most effective ways of organising the trade union movement's presence in the community itself. And what we want to look at in this motion is what has been achieved by one local TUC, that's Sheffield TUC, working with the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union. But that's just one example. What we want to see is a revitalisation of the link between trade unions and trade union councils. The three themes in the motion are, as I said, the relationship between TUCs and local trade unions, what's been achieved by Sheffield TUC, and organising the unorganised. I can't see any other method of linking together the trade union movement and the local community more effectively than trade union councils. The Sheffield TUC has taken this to the extent from 2019 of funding a local organising worker to go into the sectors which are difficult to reach and to galvanise and to encourage young people to take part in organising themselves and taking action. Now, one thing that struck me during our discussion yesterday is that we're looking at groups of workers who are already well organised, who are taking industrial action, and that's an incentive, that's an encouragement to young people who are not already in a union to take action themselves and join and organise. But we first have to reach out and draw them in. So that's the first step which we're asking trade unions, other than just the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, to recognise. We realise that individual trade unions take various actions to recruit and organise, but we want to see something which goes into the community itself and attempts to draw people in directly. We're saying to the bigger unions, take the example of the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union and apply it in the areas in which you organise, in the towns and districts and cities. What the BFAU and Sheffield TUC are looking at is union cities, union towns, places where there are local organisers organised directly by individual trade unions and local TUCs, trying to bring into organisation workers who would not normally be brought into organisation. And what better time could there be than now to do that? If anybody wanted to look at what can be achieved by effective action, they've only got to listen to the news each day. So there's every opportunity now for the bigger unions to take up the initiative, which has been led by the Bakers Union, and to do something to put it into effect across this country. Since 2019, the Bakers Union and Sheffield TUC have worked together, and what's been achieved over that time is quite phenomenal, really. In a city where the tradition of low pay is well documented, it's meant that there have been some real victories. Okay, local victories in a single city, but what that means is that this is an example of what can be done and can be built on. Since 2021, the TUC in Sheffield has organised a further session of full-time worker organising. It's reached the point where workers have achieved a 44% pay rise most recently in an exceptionally difficult to organise hospitality area. It's also reached the point in this year where they've achieved the first trade union recognition agreement in the hospitality sector. So what we're saying is, don't leave it to the BFEU. Big unions work with local TUCs to set up local community organisers. I move.
President, Congress, Joe Simpson, Deputy General Secretary of the POA. We believe so much in this motion that it is now our policy as a trade union that all branches within the POA affiliate to the regional TUC and their local trades councils. Colleagues, I sit and watch the TV, I see all the superstars from the trade union movement like Mick Lynch, Sharon Graham, and our colleagues from ASLEF and the FBU talking about organising. But the one meeting that stuck in my mind about that was at GFTU with Dave Ward from the CWU, when he started to talk about rebuilding our movement and building it back up from the grassroots. Colleagues, the Trades Council are a vital part of that work. They are in our communities. They are out there organising, and we should be in there as trade unions and affiliates of the TUC to support that work. Congress, please support.
President, Congress, Sarah Woolley, General Secretary of the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, obviously here to support motion 66. There are millions of working people not in trade unions in the UK. These are the workers most likely to need support at work, whether it be around pay, terms and conditions or health and safety. These are the workers most likely not to be aware of their rights, afraid to challenge their employer when something doesn't feel right, and who will leave and go somewhere else if things get worse or have an accident, leaving them unable to work at all. The work Sheffield TUC Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise has done is inspirational. I know Leeds TUC has started doing something similar. Leeds get organised around the same model, reaching out to these workers citywide across multiple sectors and supporting them organising their workplaces. And Rotherham's building up using a similar model too. But 3 trades councils is not enough. They certainly haven't the finances to do it alone, and as a much smaller union than many in the room, the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union couldn't support every trades council to take up the initiative, even though we absolutely want to. Trades councils, as Joe said, are a vital part of our movement, and we need to support them so that they can support us. Using the SNAP model raises trade union consciousness across cities in multiple sectors covering many employers, therefore contributing to the growth of our movement. That alongside our Organise Now project, which is another avenue for unorganised workers to get support organising their workplace, we have a huge opportunity to reach those millions and millions of people not currently in trade unions, organise them, which will grow our movement but also strengthen it, and our power. Support the motion, get your Trades Council's delegates on board to push for the model to be introduced, and volunteer for Organise Now as well. Please support.
Thank you. We'll now vote on motion 66. Will all those in favour please show? Any against? That is carried. Congress, we return to section 2 of the General Council report, Respect and Voice at Work, the section on employment rights. I call motion 20, Technology and Automation, Delivering Skills and Workplace Protection. The General Council support the motion. It's to be moved by Usdaw and seconded by Aegis.
Good morning, Conference. Dave McCrossam from Usdaw moving motion 20 on technology and automation. In recent years, technology has been playing an ever-increasing role in the workplace. Automation, artificial intelligence and big data are all changing the world of work, from what we do to how we do it, and importantly, how we're managed. While technological change has the potential to offer benefits, as we saw during the pandemic, it is also creating significant challenges for workers. That's why it's such an important issue for the trade union movement, and it's why we have to act now. Earlier this year, Usdaw launched our policy statement on understanding technology and automation shaping the future at work. The statement was underpinned by a survey of over 3,000 of our members, and the results highlight the extent of the challenges that lie ahead for us. 1 in 5 workers are extremely concerned about their job security over the next 5 years. 6 in 10 workers don't understand what data their employer is collecting on them. And 9 in 10 workers say their employer has failed to consult on the introduction of new technology in the workplace. So Congress, this isn't just a problem for our members and the workers, it's bad for business. 3/4 of workers believe that better consultation can make technology more effective in the workplace. But instead, employers continue to waste huge sums of money on technology that doesn't even work properly. Workers deserve to have an input into decisions that affect them. Sadly, we can't rely on employers to do this. They never seem to want to do the right thing, and that's why Usdaw is calling for a legal right to collective consultation on the implementation of new technology in the workplace. At the same time as failing to consult, many employers are failing totally to invest in training and reskilling. Estimates suggest that nearly 9 in 10 UK employees will need to retrain by 2030. That's an additional cost of £13 billion each year. Congress, that's 90% of the workforce over the next 8 years. So employers need to act now, and so does this sham of a government. Yet last year, the government needlessly scrapped the Union Learning Fund in England, and they've continuously failed to address the huge flaws in the apprenticeship levy. These choices are not only seriously undermining skills development, but also economic growth. So, Conference, it's absolutely clear. We need urgent and fundamental reform of the apprenticeship levy. We need the reinstatement of the Union Learning Fund across England, and we need a right to pay time off for retraining. Worryingly, many of the workers who are struggling to access retraining opportunities are those in the most insecure forms of employment. For technology to benefit working people, it must be accessible to all workers. But instead of levelling the playing field, this government's failings are widening inequality. So as well as ensuring that workers have the skills to be able to benefit from new technology, Usdaw is calling for mandatory equality impact assessments and, crucially, a requirement for employers to act upon those findings. To ensure these new provisions are enforced, we also need stronger trade union rights. This includes a significant reduction in the threshold for trade union recognition and stronger protections against redundancy. Because at present, it's just too easy and too cheap for employers to sack people. That needs to change. That has to change. Change to deliver more investment in skills and training. Change to ensure workers can benefit from developing technology trends, and change that focuses on stronger industrial relations. On this basis, trade unions can make workers' voice heard by both employers and by the government. We can protect workers and we can make the future of work fair and just for everybody. Conference, please support this motion.
President, Conference, Brian Lynn, General Secretary of Aegis, the Union, and we'd like to support this motion. In particular, the amendment that we put in for lifelong learning and union learning. Aegis is a small union in the finance sector, and we had a fantastic union learning operation until the Tories stopped it. Basically, over 7 or 8 years, we received roughly about £2 million worth of funds to put forward our operation. And through that time, Exeter University did a study on our project, and they worked out that it delivered about £12 million back into the economy. Not only that, we saw thousands of members and non-members in the finance sector getting new qualifications provided through the Union Learn funding. And I think if we get a Labour government soon, the first thing they have to do is reinstate the Union Learn funding. I support. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll vote now on motion 20. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Any against? That is carried. I now call motion 24, improve bereavement care. General Counsel support the motion. It's to be moved by RCM and seconded by the Society of Radiographers.
Congress. I'm Sarah Jones and I'm representing the Royal College of Midwives, moving motion 24, improving bereavement care. It feels quite apt to be stood here giving this speech after Baby Loss Awareness Week and following the publication of the maternity and neonatal staffing publication by the All Parliamentary Groups on Baby Loss and Maternity. This report called for an evidence from women, families and maternity staff, and it reveals that staffing shortages are severe, pervasive and having a profound impact on services. Staffing shortages mean poorer care. Women and families ultimately face the detriment of this because of underfunding. Families are being cared for by teams who may be inexperienced in bereavement care. Women, midwives and maternity support workers want this to stop immediately. We know that we still have NHS providers who have no specialist bereavement services. And we also know that this is detrimental for women and families and midwives and maternity support worker role satisfaction. As a midwife, for me, standing speaking to you, I can tell you this is heartbreaking for everybody. What I want, and what I know all midwives and maternity support workers want, is to be able to deliver high quality and safe care, and that is why I'm stood here. The staffing and funding crisis has to be addressed, and stopping the exodus of midwives is central to that. It's also crucial that we strive to reduce the number of baby deaths and we do everything in our professional power to prevent this from happening. We also need and must see better funding for midwives and maternity support workers to access training for bereavement care. Not providing this again can be traumatic for families, midwives and all healthcare professionals. If I tell you that only 49% of NHS providers provide bereavement care due to lack of funding for training and 12% of this time is in midwives' working hours, I know that you'll agree that this is not good enough. Furthermore, an estimated 1 in 5 pregnancies ends in miscarriage. And despite this, we're in 2022 and women are still experiencing stigma in the workplace and are not able to talk about the pregnancy loss. There's currently no statutory entitlement to maternity, paternity or parental bereavement leave following a pregnancy loss that occurs under 24 weeks of pregnancy. Our Equalities Act 2010, however, does include a protected 2-week period against discrimination, dismissal, redundancy and unfair treatment related to pregnancy, miscarriage or related sick leave. Sickness related to pregnancy or miscarriage is legally protected, and employees must use this as a separate absence, as unfavourable treatment may be seen as sex discrimination. We can take action in workplaces by embedding existing legal protections in collective agreements and encouraging employers to commit to the Miscarriage Association Pregnancy Loss Pledge. This sends a strong message of support that women's pregnancy loss is acknowledged, support is deserved, and the stigma can be removed. Congress, on behalf of women, families, midwives and maternity support workers, please support this motion. Thank you.
President, Congress, Richard Evans, Society of Radiographers, really proud to support Sarah and our friends in the Royal College of Midwives in seconding this motion. As we've heard, miscarriage is a very difficult time for families. Sonographers, I want to give the sonographer aspect on this. Members of the SOR play a fundamental role in the diagnosis and the initial communication of findings during miscarriage and other early pregnancy complications. As part of the National Bereavement Care Pathway, all staff who come into contact with bereaved parents should have access to bereavement care training. Well, as we've heard, due to staffing shortages and the way some services are managed, not all sonographers are able to access suitable funded training during their working time. Some dedicated sonographers undertake training in their own time and at their own expense, but this is not sustainable. It can't be for all and is clearly not acceptable as a means to ensure these essential skills are developed. Once a diagnosis of miscarriage has been made, sonographers support parents to meet with a dedicated healthcare professional to discuss their ongoing care needs and support. For parents to be provided with personalised care and support, it's essential that sufficient numbers of trained staff are available, particularly in specialist bereavement services. Miscarriages are diagnosed in early pregnancy assessment units and other outpatient settings 7 days of the week. So to provide equity of access to care, staff trained in bereavement care should be available on those 7 days of the week. Delays in accessing trained healthcare professionals to provide this ongoing care not only impacts on the well-being and mental health of parents, it also impacts on sonographers, midwives, other healthcare staff, on their workload and on their stress levels. It can also clearly lead to delays for other parents and patients who are waiting to be scanned that day. Now, this motion calls for investment in bereavement services and for all of us to negotiate for employers to adopt humane practices in line with the Pregnancy Loss Pledge. This is work we all can do. It's important work, it's compassionate work. Please support the motion.
Thank you. I think we're ready now to vote on motion 24. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? That is carried. I call motion 25, Westminster attack on fire and rescue. The General Council support the motion. It's to be moved by the FBU and seconded by the POA.
President, Congress, Ben Selby, Fire Brigade Union. In May this year, the Westminster Government published its white paper, Reforming Our Fire and Rescue Service. This is the biggest attack on the Fire and Rescue Service, on the firefighters that serve in it, and against the Fire Brigade Union that we've ever seen. The attack is coming, and it's our duty to prepare our members for it, our union for it, and the wider Labour movement for it. This attack originates in the Home Office under Priti Patel. It also comes from the so-called Independent Inspectorate of Fire and Rescue Services in England. And it's also a power grab by the National Fire Chiefs Council, the unelected company chum charity for chief fire officers. The white paper contains no direct plans to improve the services provided to the public. It will not solve the building safety crisis exposed by the Grenfell Tower fire. It promises no new investment in firefighters or equipment to improve our service. Instead, the white paper aims to remove the ability for firefighters to shape their service. It aims to reduce our members to a shut up and do as you're told workforce, and the white paper is an attack on local democracy. It plans to remove local councils from fire authorities and hand power to police and crime commissioners. This will make it easier for them to impose cuts and privatisation in our industry and make it harder for communities to hold their local fire service to account. Delegates, you'll know that currently firefighters across the UK have collective bargaining rights over pay and conditions through the National Joint Council. Ministers have pledged to review the NJC, and the Fire Inspectorate has proposed an independent pay review body. Many of you in this hall who work in the NHS, the prison service and education will know the damage pay review bodies do. First and foremost, a pay review body excludes a union from discussions and determination of pay and conditions. In Congress, firefighters will not give up our hard-fought and won collective bargaining rights without one hell of a fight. The white paper also threatens new anti-union laws. The previous inspector in England urged ministers to consider the removal of the right for firefighters to strike. Ministers want minimum service arrangements. Firefighters' right to democratically organise, assemble and speak includes the right to take industrial action up to and including lawful strike action. Any ban on that restriction is a political attack designed to silence the voice of firefighters. Our members, like other public sector workers, have the ability to withdraw their labour and continue to fight for this right. The white paper is seeking to give chief fire officers what they call operational independence. Operational independence is carried over from policing and reduces elected authority oversight over chief officers. So-called operational independence would allow PCCs to set the budget and give chief fire officers complete licence to decide how that budget is spent. It would allow chief fire officers to close even more fire stations, remove more fire appliances and cut more firefighter jobs without much local scrutiny or consultation with local communities. And it would, of course, attempt to remove the voice of firefighters and those locally representing them. Congress, in closing, the Fire Reform White Paper is anti-union and anti-democratic. It seeks to place more power at the hands of individual chief fire officers and the unelected National Fire Chiefs Council. It's an anti-fire brigade union agenda which will damage the service and the service our members provide. So the FBU has launched our campaign and is seeking your support and solidarity. We'll be putting our arguments to the public because the Fire Brigade Union is and remains the professional voice of firefighters and that of the Fire and Rescue Service. Ministers are coming to attack us. We will face up to that, and with your support, we will build that fight back. Congress, I move. See you on the street. Solidarity.
President, Congress, Steve Gillen, General Secretary of the POA, very happy to second this very important motion. It's not the FBU's problem, it's the whole trade union movement's problem. Because if they can do it to one union, like my union, restricting us on the right to strike, giving us, there's no such thing as an independent pay review body. That's a fact. They get a remit letter and they're told what to do by government. That's the fact of pay review bodies. It's almost like collective begging rather than collective bargaining. But the reality is, an injury to one is an injury to all. So the FBU need our support, because if they can get away with this, with the POA, which we've suffered this since 1994, and we've been campaigning ever since,
And I've got to say, I will pay tribute to Frances O'Grady because she's absolutely been superb in backing this small trade union in our fight to get restoration of trade union rights and move away from pay review bodies in order to get free collective bargaining back. So I commend you, Frances, for your assistance on that. But you know, we need to be campaigning together, all trade unions, so that we can understand what each trade union is facing. There needs to be more dialogue in relation to that. And FBU, the PRA will stand with you on this issue because we know what it feels like. But let me be clear, even with the restriction on our trade union rights, since I've been General Secretary in 2010, we have never, ever repudiated any action that our members have taken, and we never will, and we've told the High Court that as well. So support the FBU. It's not their struggle, it's all our struggle. Support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll vote now on motion 25. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? That is carried. Congress, just to let you know, we are running slightly ahead of schedule, so I'd like to give you warning that if we have enough time at the end of this session, I will take emergency motion 1, Royal Mail. That's not a guarantee, but hopefully we will do that. I now call Composite Motion 8, Campaigning for Freelance and Self-Employed Workers. General Counsel support the Composite Motion. It's to be moved by the NUJ, seconded by AUE, and I will also call Equity.
Thank you. Congress, Natasha Hurst, National Union of Journalists, moving Composite 8. I've been a freelance photojournalist for about 12 years now, and I absolutely love what I do. Freelancing is a choice for me, as it is for many others. I'd just like to give a big shout out to our freelance colleagues who are working in the room alongside us at Congress this week. My decision to be self-employed was in the hope that I would have more control over my working life. But ironically, there are many situations where, even though I'm my own boss, I actually find myself having less power and less protection, fewer rights than if I'd stayed in employment. I have no holiday pay. I have no sick pay. I can't rely on a steady monthly income. I pay for my own equipment, software, insurance, before I can even start working, and those are all costs that really add up. Before the pandemic and before the cost of living crisis, the situation with freelance rates was already a race to the bottom, and it was compounded by huge job cuts across our industry, forcing journalists into freelancing or out of journalism altogether. Freelancers who just about kept up with their living costs now can't, and we're losing them from the industry. Composite 8 highlights the cuts to set rates across UK news media, but budgets have also been cut. So often there's less work for less money, and there are more of us competing for that work. Our freelance members also frequently come to us with asking for support around things like copyright infringements, which is basically theft of their work, non-payment of invoices, exploitative clauses in contracts, and many freelancers, myself included, who work for publications or clients that don't have set rates. We have to negotiate those ourselves. And too often, those commissioning work want as much as possible for as little as possible. And there is always someone out there who is willing to do the job at a cheaper rate, or even for nothing at all, which is often the case with photography. Challenging this can mean losing work and never being commissioned by their editor again. It's a very stressful line that we have to tread, and we shouldn't have to. People commissioning work have far more power than any individual freelance, and that puts us in a really weak position in our industry right now. Even more so if you're a disabled journalist or from another minoritized community. The NUJ's Freelance Charter and Fair Deal for Freelancers campaign aims to highlight and collectively tackle these issues. Freelancers need unions, not just on issues of pay. We're often incredibly isolated at work, and that's where the support network of a union comes in. A few years ago, I fled domestic violence, and it absolutely decimated my career. I was homeless, I was very nearly bankrupt, and with PTSD, I was unable to work for quite some time. That's an incredibly frightening situation to be in when you're self-employed, and it's a very difficult situation to get yourself out of. I genuinely do not know how I would have been able to rebuild my career and my life without my union. Being a union member and a union activist gives me power, so much more than if I were on my own. And a few years on from that situation, here I am. I'm now the Vice President of my union, and I'm standing here talking to all of you at Congress. But where else would I have found those kind of opportunities to transform my own life and also make a difference to other people's lives? There's so many examples why freelancers need trade unions. And small unions like the NUJ need the weight of the trade union movement behind us to promote and normalise trade union membership for freelance workers. Of course, we call for solidarity for freelancers in the creative industries, but Congress, this is also your wake-up call. Whatever industry you work in, this is happening to your members increasingly too. Casuals and gig economy workers, employers cutting jobs and then contracting people back to do the same work as freelancers on less money and with far less protection at work. It's happening everywhere, and we've been dealing with it for decades. Freelancing must remain a choice, but a genuine one, and it's time to make visible the exploitation and lack of protection that freelancers live with. We need you with us in this fight. Conference, I move.
Hi, Lorraine Monk, Artists Union England. The number of self-employed workers in the UK was officially 4.1 million in 2021. I'll say that again, 4.1 million. Two-thirds do not have a regular income, and many rely on savings to get through the year. Many have no sick pay beyond statutory sick pay, no paid holidays, and no ability to provide for maternity or parental leave apart from the statutory if you're lucky. The work is often seasonal, intermittent, and/or project-led. Many people working in the creative industries are self-employed, sometimes through choice, but often because one-off contracts are all that is available. Self-employment can give some workers opportunities and flexibility. It can equally be almost impossible to manage. Where desperate for work, I've known artists set their prices far too low, subsequently effectively working for a couple of pounds an hour. And let me be clear, we aren't talking about working for pleasure or painting for a hobby. We're talking about making enough money to buy food, pay bills, pay heating, pay materials, pay your studio rent. Many young artists and curators are forced to give up. No wonder many European countries subsidise their creative industries, and Ireland recently introduced a scheme for universal benefit income for artists. Self-employed artists are sometimes offered work in inappropriate and unsafe situations. Our casework has grown, involving young self-employed artists being sexually harassed and propositioned, and many young artists are cheated by unscrupulous employers, not giving proper contracts and not paying the agreed price. Many of our self-employed members are forced to take second jobs to survive. They work in education, community and hospitality, and sometimes those contracts go wrong as well, and we refer them to the appropriate other unions. Employment law needs to change to reflect the changes in the economy that's happened over the last few years, as Natasha pointed out. We need better contracts for self-employed workers. We need to be protecting and representing self-employed workers, 4.1 million people. We need to mobilise, represent and lobby for change. Decent jobs, decent pay, better conditions. Please support.
comrades Paul Fleming, Paul Fleming, General Secretary and Delegate from Equity. Equity is the union representing 47,000 performers, stage management, directors, designers, choreographers, variety artists, circus entertainers, and indeed clowns, although we do currently draw the line at the cabinet. Our union of 47,000 artists is majority women. Its average age is 28, and it is over 96% self-employed. The gig economy is so called not because of the megabytes or technology. The gig economy is so called because our members have been gigging since the dawn of time. And with gigging comes precarity. With gigging comes instability, and with gigging comes the inequalities that are inherent in a freelance economy. Let's be really clear about what being freelance means. It's not just the loss of maternity and paternity pay. It's not just the absence of protection of the national minimum wage, or in many cases, holiday pay. It is also the lack of the right to demand statutory recognition for a trade union, and it fundamentally taps into the misuse of cartel legislation to hold working people back. We exist in a legislative framework that assumes every self-employed person is wealthy, a sole trader, a little business, when they are not. They are working people and part of our movement too. And in the pandemic, never has it been more clear the two-tier economy that we have for freelancers. 60% of our 47,000 members were excluded from a furlough or self-employed income support scheme. 60% of them. That is nothing short, to coin a phrase, of a disgrace. But we're not here at Congress to simply demand that someone comes to save us. We're not here because no party and no government is going to do anything for this movement that we cannot do for ourselves. So over hot union summer, our members have been inspired by the action of other unions. And hopefully we come here with a story of inspiration to yourselves as well. Over 95% of British TV and film, exclusively a freelance workforce, is made on a trade union agreement. The average density on the West End of London is 85%, and wages have risen by over 90% in 15 years. These are substantial industrial wins on the back of a strong trade union, but a union that is getting stronger because of the example that has been set by our comrades from across the movement over this summer and moving into the autumn of action. So I say this: every single one of us in this room is threatened by a two-tier workforce of the employed and the self-employed. This isn't about bogus self-employment and fighting exploitation. This is about a fundamental change to the framework in which the self-employed have to operate. We need you united together through our TUC to demand that change of government and to demand something better of every boss in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now vote on composite motion 8. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? That is carried. I now call motion 28, protecting public servants from bullying and harassment. General Counsel support the motion. It's to be moved by the FDA and seconded by Prospect.
President, Congress, Lucille Thirlby, FDA, moving motion 28. Every employee deserves the right to work without fear of bullying and harassment. And whilst most public services have tried and tested processes for dealing with bullying and harassment, the system for public servants who interact with ministers and politicians has consistently been found unfit for purpose. Congress, we know the impact of bullying and harassment are profound and long-lasting. We know that not undertaking investigations or dealing with complaints can lead from a very challenging situation that is distressing for the individual and make it worse, and even greater impact on that individual. Investigations under the Ministerial Code have to be sanctioned by the Prime Minister, who is also the sole arbiter of the outcome. Investigations are not transparent, with no published process and no right of challenge. As we have seen time and time again, Even with serious sexual harassment, Prime Ministers have prioritised their own political interests over the welfare of public and civil servants. Congress, ministers are still facing accusations and still being sacked from the front bench. Although we do not think the latest incident at the Tory party conference involved a civil servant, if it had, there would be nowhere for that person to take their complaint. A stark reminder of why this motion is so important and why we need that change. FDA recognises that Liz Truss may have a few fair things on her to-do list, but she has to appoint an independent ethics advisor. When asked during the leadership campaign, she suggested it was unnecessary. She said that was because she understood the difference between right and wrong and also acted with integrity. I mean, far be it from me to judge her, but saying you always act with integrity means as much as me saying I'd like to rid the world of misogyny and lecherous behaviour, but it doesn't actually make it happen. The Cabinet Secretary confirmed that the role of the civil servant is to support the government of the day. Well understood. The function is not to provide some sort of judicial function over ministers. This is why we need an independent ethics advisor to be created. That independent role, advising the Prime Minister on the ministerial code and on the basis of any investigation, is critical to ensuring that civil servants have the confidence to raise a complaint in that first instance. Conference, it begs the question, why would you not want to shy away from that accountability? The conduct of Chris Pincher was a trigger for the previous Prime Minister's resignation, but again the issue was swept away aside by the candidates in the last leadership campaign. The Prime Minister has clearly stated that we don't need an ethics advisor, but who will take responsibility? Who is standing up and showing that leadership? Who is tackling the culture and enforcing the right standards? Why is the level of power in the hands of one person? Congress, we need change. FDA has fought for years to introduce the independent complaints and grievance scheme in the UK Parliament. Before this scheme, the MPs marked their own homework, and cases like John Bercow would not have been heard without the independent complaints and grievance scheme. It provides an independent process where you have an independent investigation. If the allegations are evidenced of bullying, harassment, sexual misconduct, then an independent panel looks at the sanctions that are going to be decided on. MPs are rightly excluded from that process, and this should be the same for complaints for any public or civil servant. Congress, having a process to tackle misconduct is a vital part of organisational approach to tackling harassment and bullying. But the real challenge is to enable standards of conduct that are not negotiable, that we can build an inclusive culture and prevent bullying and harassment taking place in the workplace. As yet, MPs under investigation for serious misconduct are not excluded from the parliamentary estate. They can only do so if they agree to on a voluntary basis. This cannot be right. Where would that happen in any other workplace? All parliamentary staff must be protected in the circumstances where serious substantiated allegations are made against a Member of Parliament. Parliament and the civil service should be an exemplar employer with safe workplaces and just processes leading on behalf of all of us. Congress, I move.
President, Congress, Neil Hope Collins from Prospect speaking, standing to second motion 28, an incredibly important motion for all civil servants and all those working in proximity to parliamentarians. You've had the detail explained to you by a colleague from FDA so clearly. What I want to give you is a little bit more background on, if you didn't believe it already, why this is vitally important. Congress in 2018, my union, Prospect, surveyed all our members on their experiences of sexual harassment in the workplace. We found through that research some very clear structural, organisational factors in the workplace that have a huge impact on the extent and the severity of sexual harassment in the workplace. The main conclusions were individuals with authority over the career and development of the people that they manage. There was a striking relationship between sexual harassment and age, with younger workers much more likely to suffer. Sexual harassment far more common in male-dominated environments and with those environments where there was a permissive attitude towards sexual harassment. Now, we represent staff working in the Houses of Parliament, Houses of Commons, providing library and research support for all parliamentarians. We know that our members are on average younger than the MPs that they support. So I'm going to go through those 4 criteria again, and I'd ask you to think about what we know about the Houses of Parliament and the parliamentary estate. Individuals with power over those that support them and work for them. Age differential between the managers and the managed. A male-dominated environment with a permissive attitude to sexual harassment. Congress, this motion calls on our civic leaders to be held to the same standard of conduct and oversight that applies to all workers. In seconding this motion, we believe that in light of those really high-risk factors on the parliamentary estate, those standards and oversight are even more critical for those working at the heart of government. Congress, please support this motion.
President, Congress, Elaine Daly, GMB, speaking in support of motion 28. Bullying is a problem everywhere in our society, but people are rightly shocked by the levels of bullying in the corridors of power. There is no excuse for poor behaviour directed against the catering staff, the cleaners, the clerks, the civil servants, the MP staff, and political party workers. Congress, we must stand with them. But some MPs and ministers have gotten away with it for far too long. And yes, some of our members are bullied by people who claim to represent Labour values. We must always call out those who represent the Labour Party, the party who founded to advance the cause of working people, but who treat their workers with contempt. And what message does it send when the Tory former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, cost the taxpayer £370,000 to settle a bullying employment tribunal claim, but faced no consequences? Congress, GMB members who work in Parliament, tell us the scale of the problem. Most of them know of bullying. Many have been bullied themselves. Sexual misconduct in Parliament is frighteningly common. Imagine being put in that position and knowing that your employer is also your manager, who is often the problem. MP staff need to be employed by a separate body with an independent HR department, with a clear floor for employment rights, negotiated collectively by unions, rights on maternity, paternity, and across the board. That reform is urgently needed, and our branch is calling for the support of the movement. GMB and the other recognised unions are fighting to make Westminster and Whitehall a safe and modern place to work. The most powerful people in politics and the civil service must be held to the highest standards. Please support our members and support motion 28. Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready now to vote on motion 28. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? That is carried. I now call motion 29, working in high temperatures. The General Council support the motion. It's to be moved by ASLEF, seconded by the CWU, and I'll also call Unite and NEU.
Hello Congress, my name's Angela O'Sullivan and I'm from ASLEF Union, moving motion 29, working in high temperatures. Congress, I'm a train driver and a health and safety rep at my company. The railway is a safety critical industry. We have extensive rules and regulations because if something goes wrong, it can go very wrong very quickly. Nobody wants that. But while we have strict rules and processes for many things, the conditions that drive us working have been overlooked for many years. Across the industry, we have drivers working in cabs that aren't properly cleaned. We have drivers sat in seats that cannot be adjusted properly, so you'll be able to reach the controls comfortably. We have drivers' hearing being damaged from cab environments that are just too loud. And of course, we have drivers struggling in very hot and very cold temperatures. The most modern cabs now have air conditioning, which allows the driver to control the temperature and keep the cabs comfortable. But in many areas of the country, older units are still in use. These do not have air conditioning. The train companies are overhauling older stock and modernising it. They refit the passenger saloon, they repaint it, and the bodywork looks shiny and new. But then you realise that nothing has been done to update the driver's cab. The poor driver is stuck in a decades-old cab, unsuitable environment once again. We all know this was a problem, but to find out the extent of the issues, we surveyed our members. About 1,000 drivers responded, members from all parts of the country who drive in many different types of train, and the results were stark. More than 80% of drivers had suffered with extreme heat and 7 out of 10 with extreme cold. In cold temperatures, drivers told us they had to bring blankets or hot water bottles, wear extra layers and gloves, and could see their breath in the cab while driving trains. Effects of hot temperatures included muscle cramp, exhaustion and difficulty concentrating. Drivers report needing to stay hydrated, but then not having access to toilets. Drivers deliberately dehydrating themselves and therefore their brains, which is not ideal. In some of our older cabs, particularly in the rail freight sector, drivers will tell you that they open a window to reduce the heat, only for the noise of the engine to be so loud they could not hear important audio warning safety systems. This is clearly not good enough. An uncomfortable, distracted driver is not a safe driver, not safe for themselves, the railway or the travelling public. And we know that train drivers aren't the only workers who suffer with high workplace temperatures. Yesterday, we heard about a worker in Greggs who had collapsed due to the heat. Also, I know of colleagues in hospitals, schools, factories and postal workers and many more that struggle with this issue too. ASLEF is campaigning across the industry on this issue. Our Better Driving campaign, which we launched earlier this year, calls for cabs to be designed with inputs from drivers like me. After all, we are best placed to know what we need. We have had some great success with this work, and we are doing everything we can to make sure this continues into the future. We are also calling for proper laws on workplace temperatures. Most people know there is a guideline on minimum temperatures, but it is just a guideline. There is no actual law. Oh, I'm running out of time. Please support this motion. Thank you very much.
Chair, Congress, Fiona Curtis, rising to second motion 29 on behalf of the CWU. As climate breakdown intensifies, the UK will experience extreme temperatures more frequently. In July 2022, the Met Office issued its first ever red extreme heat warning, as temperatures topped 40 degrees for the first time in UK history. Yet, there remains no effective legislation to protect UK workers from these extreme temperatures. Numerous countries around the world have strict guidance and legislation which protects workers from these dangerous conditions. Like in the US, the regulations say working temperatures should not go beyond 24 degrees. Spain has strict guidelines on working temperature. It must not go beyond 27 degrees indoors or 25 degrees for physical activity. The World Health Organization recommends 24 degrees as the maximum indoor working temperature. There is plenty of evidence that continuous exposure to high temperatures can have the dangerous impact on dehydration, heat stress, exhaustion, heat stroke, and even organ damage. For outdoor workers like CWU, postal workers, and BT, Openreach, and telecommunication workers, there's also a rising risk of skin cancer caused by exposure to UV rays and sunburn. 86% of all skin cancers in the UK are attributable to excessive exposure to sunlight. It is also widely acknowledged that productivity dips when temperatures rise above 25 degrees. Yet workers in the UK currently have very little protection from extreme heats. Regulation 7 of the Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations in 1992 states that during working hours, the temperature in all workplaces inside buildings shall be reasonable. Yet no definition of reasonable is provided, which makes enforcement almost impossible, and there's nothing for outdoor workers. Agreements at workplace level can help to mitigate this issue. The CWU and Royal Mail have agreed that all outdoor work must stop when temperatures reach 35 degrees, and all vehicles without air conditioning cease operation with all workers returning to base. BT Group are working with CWU on an agreement, as a lot of BT and Openreach staff work in offices, vans and outdoors. But imagine this. Imagine working in 40 degrees heat, going to climb a pole to install your fibre broadband whilst wearing full-length trousers for health and safety, long-sleeve high-vis for health and safety, full harness.
Can I ask you to wind up, please?
Sorry, thank you. But yet there is no upper limit to working temperatures for health and safety. We need a definite legal maximum temperature for these type of working conditions. Please support this motion.
Tracy Whittle, Unite the Union. As the weather becomes more severe, it is important that we discuss the realities of working in a climate crisis. Health and safety legislations are of a critical importance, and so are campaigns to extend the new threats that are emerging. I work in construction, and there's many of the colleagues that I work alongside work on the roads. And as the previous speaker just said, when you have your normal clothes on, followed by heavy industrial PPE, either high-vis trousers, high-vis jackets, hard hats, and boots with steel toe caps in, it's not pleasant to be outside in the sun for your 8-hour working day. Many of them don't have facilities on the sides of the roads, so they are left for whatever their bosses deem fit, which is not adequate. There is nowhere to fill up water bottles when you're working in the middle of a road. Industrially, we have taken up the demands for the proper PPE so that they can get thinner PPE. We've also asked for extra breaks for hydration and to use facilities. But also within Unite, there are many on the buses that have constantly each summer for the last few years asked, if you are out there and you are going to take a bus, please take the driver a bottle of cold water. On some of the rural locations, they have many times that they cannot even get out of the cab. There are no shops in the areas. The motion makes it clear that the ability to work in high temperatures is not only of importance to the workers, but as I just said, some of them with our passengers as well. A survey of over 5,000 bus workers revealed that 89% of drivers said they felt ill during the past year because of the heat in their cabs. Just as shockingly and worrying, as we look towards the winter, 70% of drivers said that on cold days, buses are not heated adequately, and over 1 in 5 felt unwell as a result of working in the cold temperatures. Congress, our commitment to safety in the workplace, inside and outside, has never been of more importance. Please support this motion.
Good afternoon, Congress. Emma Brady, NEU, first-time delegate and first-time speaker. I'd like to talk in support of this motion. On the ground, in our classrooms, during the summer of 2022, educators were working in conditions in excess of 36 degrees C. These were unbearable working conditions for pregnant members, for those which have underlying health conditions, and those going through the menopause. These were also very few mitigations which are in place. What we also consider are the lack of funding in our schools have led to these conditions. Many of our buildings are not fit for purpose, as we've heard from previously today. Often the buildings are a sea of glass, acting like a greenhouse. Members are unable to leave the classroom, obviously to leave students unattended. They have limited access to water. Many of the classrooms have had windows replaced on the cheap, making the windows difficult to open, so the airflow in the classrooms is limited, as we've experienced during COVID. Many of the classrooms do not even have blinds. If they do, often they are broken. Some schools have their budget squeezed so much that these important mitigations have not been applied. This is not going to be a unique situation. The climate crisis is upon us. This is going to happen year after year. What we need now is to plan for this. We need to make sure that mitigations are in place. Things, for example, like relaxing the uniform code within schools, providing water to students and educators in our classrooms. We need to make sure that the working conditions for our educators is going to mean that people want to enter the profession, as we are struggling to recruit on all levels. We would really like you to support this motion, make education and making the situation which educators experience during the summer in their classrooms more desirable. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now vote on motion 29. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? That is carried. I call motion 30, the lack of health and safety legislation on footwear at work. General Counsel support the motion. It's to be moved by the Royal College of Podiatry and seconded by SOR. And I will also take a contribution from USDOR.
Thank you. President, Congress, I'm Sue Pike. I am a podiatrist, a worker, and I'm also a rep for the Royal College of Podiatry, and I'm moving this motion today. Every one of us in this room at some point will have had an impact on improving health and safety in the workplace. We'll have looked after our workers, protecting them from harm, and often preserving life. At the Royal College, we believe every employer deserves a good health and safety, and one of the things that's often overlooked is footwear. We think employers must do more to ensure that workers have access to correct fitting and proper footwear in order to protect their feet. We acknowledge the work of our fellow trade unions, USDOR, FBU and CWU, I'm sure there's more of you as well, that are campaigning for safety shoes and ensuring the feet of their members are protected. We don't really think about our feet, but they are really important. Our feet and ankles are key to keeping the rest of the body stable and mobile. They absorb the impact of us walking, running, climbing, and ensure that we can stand without putting unnecessary pressure on other muscles and joints. The feet contain almost a quarter of the bones of our body, plus loads of ligaments, connective tendons, and in a normal working day, not for me because I sit on my bum all day, but for a lot of you, they can do up to 15 miles a day. That's huge, isn't it? Massive. And if you sustain an injury to your feet, you can find everyday tasks such as walking, driving, and standing difficult. Might be painful. And sometimes that damage can lead to long-term issues such as deformity or ulceration. Myself and our many members at the Royal College deal with the impact of ill-fitting footwear every single day. There's also additional resources on our NHS, in surgery and for rehabilitation services. One of our student members, Jennifer Anderson, has recently written a PhD investigating footwear solutions for workers who have to stand for long periods of time. Jennifer's research highlighted the impact of prolonged standing on our bodies and found that footwear had a really strong link to pain in the foot, ankle, back and other joints. Until recently, the impact of footwear on workers has been overlooked, and Jennifer's research has directly linked footwear with a reduction in musculoskeletal disorders in workers, which in turn can reduce absence, improve the quality of life for our workers, and of course have a financial implication. You'll know from your members that we face lots of hazards in the workplace, whether that's oily or slippery floors, whether it's heat, cold, whether it's machinery that can crush or damage our feet, the odd stapler or laptop falling on your toe if you're an office worker, whether it's risk of burns. All of these can have additional problems such as chilblains and athlete's foot as well. And our correct footwear can really protect us from such injuries, but it also directly promotes better posture. One of the companies that we've worked with, Charnwood, who manufacture safety footwear, report that there are a number of studies showing correlation between workers wearing correctly fitting footwear and a significant reduction in the number of sickness absence for back-related issues. Women can also face extra difficulties obtaining appropriate safety footwear if their feet are particularly slender or if they're pregnant and they're experiencing swollen feet and ankles. And for our workers, whether you're in a building site, a factory, whether you're a performer, a freelancer, a professional sports person, access to the right footwear is vital. The Royal College of Podiatry and the TUC have campaigned for many years around correct footwear at work. And according to the Health and Safety Executive, 27.3 million working days are lost annually due to injury and illness. And accidents involving the foot make up nearly a quarter, 24% of those incidents, which costs around 85 million annually. So a small thing can make a big difference. Health and safety law still only requires safety footwear to be worn if there is a real risk of injury. Now, we've heard from the previous motion about temperature. That's up to then employers to decide what is a real risk. So it leaves our members unprotected. Employers need to be held to account and ensure that workers have access to the proper safety footwear, whatever industry they are in. So we therefore call on the TUC to work with the Royal College of Podiatry and other stakeholders to campaign for tighter legislation on footwear. Thank you for listening. I move.
President, Congress, Richard Evans, Society of Radiographers, delighted to second this motion from our comrades at the Royal College of Podiatry. They're also our neighbours. We love our feet. In 2021, £11 billion was spent on shoes in the UK. Some of them must have been quite good. Good foot health and what that means for working people is reflected in many of the ways we describe our movement and our work and the activities we get involved in as trade unionists. We stand together, we take strides forward, we keep our feet on the ground and encourage our emerging activists to find their feet and think on their feet. We encourage one another so we don't get cold feet. We like to get a foot in the door, and if we don't, we can vote with our feet. I think that's probably enough of them. Our movement is rightly proud of our record in fighting for better safe practices, for pressing for legislation and for supply of protective measures, as we've heard this morning. You might say that we've put our collective foot down, blast. Mark described yesterday as being on the front foot, which is good. Anyway, what I particularly like about this motion is that it takes the concept of safe footwear a step further. See? Safe footwear in every workplace, will make a massive contribution to health and well-being of our members. In turn, this will promote productivity, it'll reduce impacts on hard-pressed health services, and it will require employers to identify suitable and safe footwear and to provide it for those employees that are unable to afford to purchase their own. The best employers are already doing this. We want to see good practice adopted everywhere through campaigning, training, and making the case for better work. And we want this backed by new legislation that will ensure that some of that huge expenditure on shoes will begin to pay back in terms of fewer injuries, greater strength, and improved health for all. Please support.
John McEwen from USDOR, President, Conference Delegates. I'm here to speak in support of Motion 30, which was moved by the Royal College of Podiatry. Personally, a few years ago, I got a brand new pair of safety shoes and put them on. Great for the first day. Start the second day, they were digging into my ankle bones, constant pain, really uncomfortable. So went to see my manager, health and safety manager. He then went through what he could do. We spoke to the manufacturer of the safety shoes, and they actually did recommend a few different pairs after asking, what do you work with temperature-wise, what chemicals, what products. So after this chat, they sent this pair of shoes out, a lot lighter, a lot better design. Not every shoe is going to suit everybody, so definitely support this as we need legislation. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll now vote on motion 30. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? That is carried. Congress, as we discussed yesterday, our President for the 2021 conference, Gail Cartmel, didn't have the opportunity to address delegates in person. So I'm really delighted, Gail, colleague and friend, to invite you to do that now.
Well, thank you very much, President. And it's a bit like whack-a-mole. I promise I'm the last president to make an address. And it's, of course, a great honour to serve as a TUC president. And delegates, I won't keep you long. But I do want to take this opportunity to remind you of a president's address
made by our very dear Mark Sawatka in 2019. He said, "Congress, 2 weeks ago, I passed an important milestone, 1,000 days since my heart transplant, an operation, my 4th life-saving one, carried out by the greatest achievement of our labour movement, the National Health Service." He went on to say, "An NHS representing everything we stand for, made up of a team of public sector workers, our doctors, nurses, surgeons, radiographers, cleaners, porters, catering staff, admin staff, paramedics, physiotherapists, community nurses, and many more. All part of a team, all struggling with a lack of resources, underpaid, and many of them privatised." And he said, and this is in 2019, "Let's give them a sign of our appreciation." And we did. We all applauded, and rightly so. But the following year, we were applauding again, weren't we? Outside of our homes, because the same workers that looked after Mark bravely went forward and confronted COVID at great risk to themselves. And they gave us the very best care and comfort, doing all that they could to ensure that nobody died alone. So, and this isn't a requirement, by the way. Any member of the General Council, don't think that this is a requirement to be a president. The following year, I myself had 2 life-saving operations. I too witnessed the resilience of a workforce upon whom unreasonable demands are made. So to be a president, you don't have to go through that, just to reassure anybody lining up. And during my hospital stays, the only complaint from staff was that there were too few of them. The only complaint was there were too few of them, and that they were worried that the best care they could give was not good enough. Quite remarkable. My presidency, I have to say, by the way, as an aside, Kevin Courtney brought a Welsh choir to me when I was in intensive care. I'm told it was a morphine, but it was a lovely performance, and thank you very much indeed, Kevin. My presidency and vice president terms were, of course, as a result of all of that, served in between various personal crises. And so many thanks to Jed, a former president you heard from yesterday, and Sue, our lovely Sue, and all the TUC staff that enabled me to carry on and do my best when I could. But I'm here because, like Mark, I was in the care of our wonderfully diverse NHS workforce. Workers, as Mark pointed out and reminded us yesterday, are from across the world, and they are welcome here. Since Mark's presidential address, the NHS crisis has, of course, deepened. We heard about it yesterday. So, Congress, I hope you will allow me, and Sue, President, I hope you'll allow me to dedicate this speech to each and every one of them, and to my union Unite, one of the health trade unions, to our leaders, my own fabulous Sharon Graham, and to Standing Up to the Profiteers, and to our sister unions. I want to say a special mention to my friend Christina McInerney from Unison, formidable and leading coordination alongside our union and others. And it was Claire Sullivan, leader, another woman, leader of the CSB, who said at the recent TUC Executive Committee, the NHS is facing an existential crisis. So, Congress, today, let's remember the wise words from Aneurin Bevan.
I think you probably know this by heart. The NHS will last as long as there are folk left with the faith to fight for it. And Congress, if it's not us to take forward that fight, who? So I say we will do that with our communities, and that it is our challenge. It was an honour to serve as TUC President, thank you, and thanks again to my own Union Unite. And I do believe that together we have the faith, courage and determination to kick out this nasty government, rebuild our NHS and pay them their true worth. But I've got an update. Mark told me this morning that today marks 2019 days since his life-saving heart surgery. Thank you very much. Solidarity.
Thank you very much, Gail. You were certainly a courageous president under the most difficult of personal circumstances, and I salute you for that. Right, Congress, as indicated earlier, we've finished the published business and we do have a bit of time remaining. So I will now take emergency motion 1 on the Royal Mail. The General Council support the emergency motion. It is to be moved by the CWU and seconded by Unite.
President Conference, Tony Cairns, Deputy General Secretary, Communication Workers Union, to move emergency motion E1 on Royal Mail, and to thank the GPC and the General Council, and particularly the President, for allowing us to move this motion today, which is relevant, the relevance of which I'll come on to in a minute. But I just want to take you back a little bit to February 2020, when the CWU in Royal Mail announced 115,000 postal workers had returned a 95% yes vote to take industrial action on behalf of defending terms and conditions in that company. And a few weeks later, we went into lockdown. The pandemic hit, and it soon became apparent to us that both the employer and the government needed our members, put them in the front line. They went to work and put their lives on the line because this country needed to be connected. Somebody needed to deliver PPE equipment. Somebody needed to deliver test kits, and that somebody was the CWU members. We went and did that work. Our members went and did that work in unenviable conditions. But as a result of that, that allowed us some breathing space, postponing that industrial action ballot to get into negotiations with Royal Mail. And this is significant. In March of last year, we agreed an agreement with Royal Mail, the title of which is significant. It was called Pathway to Change. The clue is in the title. We agreed a way to change the industry, that we would sit down and negotiate with Royal Mail. And we put that agreement to our members significantly. Over 91% of our members agreed with us that that Pathway to Change agreement was the way forward for the company and the way forward for our members. 18 months on, and a £750,000 salaried, £150,000 bonused, £700,000 windfall share chief executive, Simon Thompson, ripped the agreement up. Now, Royal Mail and the government will tell you that the CWU is resistant to change. Let's be absolutely clear here. That is a lie. We made a Pathway to Change agreement to engage with the company, deliver change and improvements in terms and conditions. The people who are resisting change, the people who resist the negotiations, the people who are out to wreck this company are the senior managers in Royal Mail and their approach to this industry and the attack on CWU members. They've imposed a pay deal, they've ripped up the protective agreements we've got for our members, and they've announced change that ultimately will destroy this public service, which is why we've put this emergency motion in front of Congress. What's interesting when they say about how much money they're losing, and we put it in the motion, is it was only 6 months ago that they announced record profits of £758 billion and £400 million to shareholders. It seems that too much is not enough for the greedy capitalists who now run this privatised company. We've come here arguing for a new deal for workers. We've spoken about the race to the bottom. This is why we need a new deal for workers. This is it. This is what happened in P&O, but this is P&O on steroids. This is the race to the bottom. And the CW says no. This is why we say enough is enough. And that's why we balloted again. And that's why during this summer we've seen, this is no lie, we've seen over 1,900 workplace picket lines around this country, and we bring a message of thanks to every single trade union who stood with us on those picket lines this summer and will stand with us when we take further strike action. We'll talk with Royal Mail, and we're in talks with Royal Mail. That's why the General Secretary is not here. I know you wanted Dave, but you got me. We'll talk with them. But what we're not having, and this is the game, what we're not going to have is them breaking up this company, stripping out 10,000 jobs that they want to do, what they announced last Friday, that they want to take out 10,000 jobs by next August. And the reason they want to do that is because they've actually admitted to us that their business plans means they need to recruit people. And at the same time they're telling us they want to recruit people, they're telling us they're going to take out 10,000 of our members' jobs. And the reason they want to do that is because they want to race towards the gig economy. They want to bring in new workers on 20% less terms than our members are on, working longer for less. This is Royal Mail turning this public service into the gig economy, and we're not going to hand it. They want more self-employed owner-drivers who will be at that beck and call. And what they've done, de facto, they are out to de-recognise this union. This is the situation the CW faces. They want to smash this union, and we want this Congress to agree and support this emergency motion to say you're going to stand with us. It's not about just protecting.
Tony, can you wind up, please?
The reason they want to smash this union is so they can smash the workforce. Tomorrow morning at 7:30, set your alarms early. Less than 9 minutes away from this Congress Centre, the delivery office in Brighton on North Road, mass picket. Support this motion and let us take this message to our members in that picket line tomorrow. Come and join us. No more attacking this union, no more attacking our workers' terms and conditions.
Tom Murphy, Unite the Union, President, Congress. I'm proud to second this motion on behalf of Unite. At the heart of this disgusting threat to 10,000 jobs is the grim reality of privatisation. Royal Mail, a once great public service, used to set the standards that all public postal services around the world sought to emulate. Now it is held together only by the sacrifice and unpaid labour of postal workers. The commitment to universal service is being made by members every single day. Unpaid hours, unable to take breaks, unable to take holidays. This paints a picture all too familiar for workers in the NHS, local authorities and other public services. This is the reality of privatisation, and this fight is the boss's attempts to complete the process they began a decade ago. The transformation of a 500-year-old public service reduced to a gig economy sweatshop to be picked apart by profiteers. So we must ask the question, who profits? Certainly Royal Mail's CEO Simon Thompson, who pockets 26 times the pay of an average worker. Certainly Vesa Equity Investment, Royal Mail's largest shareholder. Their takeover plans must be dragged into the light because Congress, this is the lesson Unite has drawn from disputes across the economy. From Arriva buses owned by Deutsche Bahn to the Port of Felixstowe owned by CK Hutchinson. We have to follow the money. We have to name and shame the profiteers. We have to move the share price as well as the picket line. That's how we move and beat hostile employers. And Congress, that takes unity. Let's end the assault on our postal workers. Let's drive out the profiteers. Let's make Royal Mail public again. Support this motion. Solidarity, because your fight is our fight.
Thank you. We now move to the vote on emergency motion 1. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. I don't suppose there are any against, but I've got to say it. That motion is carried. Thank you. Congress, that concludes this morning's business. Can I remind delegates there are various meetings taking place this lunchtime. Details of the meetings can be found in pages 12 and 13 of the Congress Guide. Can I also remind you about the photo opportunity for LGBT+ delegates and visitors in the hall at 12:45. If you want to be part of that photo, then please stay in the hall. Following the photo, the hall will be closed between now and 1:45. So please make sure you take anything you need with you when you leave. You will not be able to access the hall before 1:45, but please be back promptly for this afternoon session, which starts at 2:15.
Good job, Sue. Nearly there.